Chapter 1. The crook of my arm locked over the man's throat, tightening as his boots' rubber soles batted against the ground. His fingernails bit into the black fabric of my shirt and gloves, clawing at them in desperation. The oxygen was being cut off from his brain, but it didn't keep the flashes of his thoughts at bay. I saw everything. His memories and thoughts burned white hot behind my eyes, but I didn't let up. Not even when the security guard's terrified mind brought an image of himself to the surface, staring open-eyed at the blank, dark hallway's ceiling. Dead? Maybe? I wasn't going to kill him, though. The soldier stood head and shoulders over me, and one of his arms was the size of one of my legs. The only reason I had gotten the jump on him at all was because he was standing with his back to me. Instructor Johnson called this move the neck lock, and he taught me a whole collection of others: the can opener, the crucifix, the neck crank, the Nelson, the twister, the wrist lock, and the spine crack, just to name a few. All ways that I, a 5'5" girl, could get a grip on someone who outmatched me physically, enough for me to draw out a real weapon. The man was half hallucinating now. Slipping into his mind was painless and easy. All of the memories and thoughts that rose to the surface of his consciousness were stained black. The color bled through them like a lot of ink on wet paper, and it was only then, only after I had my hooks in him, that I released my grip from his neck. This probably hadn't been what he had been expecting when he came out of a shop's hidden side entrance for a smoke break. The bite in Pennsylvania's air had turned the man's cheeks bright red beneath his pale stubble. I let out a single hot breath from behind the ski mask and cleared my throat, fully aware of the 10 sets of eyes trained on me. My fingers shook as they slipped across the man's skin. He smelled like stale smoke and spearmint gum he used to try to cover his nasty habit. I leaned forward, pressing 2 fingers against his neck. "Wake up," I whispered. The man forced his eyes open, wild and childlike. Something in my stomach clenched. I glanced over my shoulder to the tactical team behind me, who were watching all of this silently, faces unseen behind their masks. "Where is prisoner 27?" I asked. We were out of the line of sight of the security cameras, the reason, I guess, this soldier felt safe enough to slip out for a few unscheduled breaks, but I was beyond anxious to have this part over. "Hurry the hell up," Vita said through gritted teeth next to me. My hand shook as a wave of heat at my back as the TAC team leader stepped up behind me. Doing this didn't hurt the way it used to. It didn't wring me out, twisting my mind into knots of pain. But it did make me sensitive to the strong feelings of anyone near me, including the man's disgust, his black, black hatred. Rob's dark hair was in the corner of my sight. The order to move forward without me was ready to spill over his lips. Of the 3 ops I'd gone on with him as leader, I'd only ever been able to finish one. "Where is prisoner 27?" I repeated, giving the soldier's mind a nudge with my own. "Prisoner 27." As he repeated the words, his heavy mustache twitched. The hint of gray there made him look a lot older than he actually was. The assignment file we'd been given at HQ had included blurbs on all the soldiers assigned to this bunker, including this one, Max Brommel, age 41, originally from Cody, Wyoming, moved to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania for a programming job, lost it when the economy tanked, a nice wife, currently out of work, 2 kids, both dead. A storm of murky images flooded every dark corner and crevice of his mind. I saw a dozen more men, all wearing the same light camo uniforms, jumping out of the back of a van, and several more from the Humvees that had bookended the bigger vehicle, full of criminals, suspected terrorists, and, if the intel the Children's League had received was correct, one of our top agents. I watched, suddenly calm, as these same soldiers led 1, 2, no, 3 men off the back of the truck. They weren't PSI Special Forces officers or FBI or CIA, and definitely not SWAT or SEAL team, all of which probably could have crushed our small force in one swift blow. No, they were National Guard servicemen, drawn back into active duty by terrible times. Our intel had been right about that at least. The soldiers had pulled hoods down tight over the prisoners' heads, then forced them down the stairs of the abandoned shop to the sliding silver door of a bunker hidden below. After much of Washington, D.C. had been destroyed by what President Gray claimed was a group of warped PSI kids, he had taken special care to build mini for- these so-called mini fortresses across the east border in case another emergency of that magnitude was to arise. Some were built beneath hotels, others into the side of mountains, and some, like this one, were hidden in plain sight in small towns, under shops or government buildings. They were for Gray's protection, the protection of his cabinet and important military officials, and, it appeared, to imprison high-risk threats to national security, including our own prisoner 27, who seemed to be getting some special treatment. His cell was at the end of a long hall, 2 stories down. It was a lonely room with a low, dark ceiling. The walls seemed to drip down around me, but the memory held steady. They kept his hood on, but bound his feet to the metal chair in the center of the cell, and the halo of light from a single naked bulb. I peeled away from the man's mind, releasing both my physical and mental grip on him. He slid down the graffiti on the wall of the abandoned laundromat, still in the clutches of his own brain's fog. Removing the memory of my face and the men behind us in the alley was like plucking stones from the bottom of a clear, shallow pond. 2 stories down, room 4B, I said, turning back to Rob. We had a sketchy outline of the layout of the bunker, but none of the small directional details. We weren't blind, but we weren't exactly killing it in the accuracy department. The basic layout of these bunkers was always about the same, though. A staircase or elevator that ran down one end of the structure and one long hall on each level stemming out from it. He held up a gloved hand, cutting off the rest of my instructions and signaling to the team behind him. I fed him the code from the soldier's memory, 68999, and stepped away, pulling Vita with me. She shoved me off into the nearest soldier, grunting. I couldn't see Rob's eyes beneath his night vision goggles as the green light flashed, but I didn't need to in order to read his intentions. He hadn't asked for us, and certainly hadn't wanted us tagging along when he, a former Army Ranger, as he loved to remind us, could easily have handled this with a few of his men. More than anything, I think he was furious he had to do this at all. If it was League policy that if you were caught, you were disavowed, no one was coming for you. If Album wanted his agent back, he had good reason for it. The clock started the moment the doors slid open. 15 minutes to get in, grab prisoner 27, and get the hell out and away. Who knew if we even had that long, though? Rob only estimated how long it would take for backup to arrive once the alarms were activated. The doorway opened to the stairwell at the back of the bunker. It wound down, section by section, into darkness, with only a few lights along the metal steps to guide us. I heard one of the men cut the wires of the security camera perched high above us, felt Vita's hand shove me forward, but it took time, too much time, for my eyes to adjust. Tracing of the laundromat's chemicals clung to the recycled dry air, burning my lungs. Then we were moving, quickly, as silently as a group of heavy boots could be thundering down a flight of stairs. My blood was thrumming in my ears as Vita and I reached the first landing. 6 months of training wasn't a long time, but it was long enough to teach me how to pull the familiar armor of focus tighter around my core. Something had slammed into my back, and then something harder, a shoulder, a gun, then another, and more, until it was a steady enough rhythm that I had to press myself against the landing's door into the bunker to avoid them. Vita let out a sharp noise as the last team blew past us. Only Rob stopped to acknowledge us. Cover us until we're through, then monitor the entrance right there. Do not leave your position. We're supposed to, Vita began. I stepped in front of her, cutting her off. No, this wasn't what the op parameters had outlined, but it was better for all of us. There was a reason for either of us to follow them down into the bunker and potentially get ourselves killed, and she knew, it had to be drilled into our skulls a million times, that tonight Rob was leader. And the very first rule, the only rule that mattered when you got to the moments between terrified heartbeats, was that you always, even in the face of fire or death or capture, always had to follow the leader. Vita was at my back, close enough to make me feel her hot breath beneath the thick black knit of my ski mask, close enough that the fury she was radiating cut through the freezing Philadelphia air. Vida always radiated a kind of bloodthirsty eagerness, even more so when Kate was leader on an op. The excitement of proving herself to a minder had always stripped away the better lessons of her training. This was a game to her, a challenge, to show off her perfect aim, her combat training, her sharply honed blue abilities. To me, it was yet another perfect opportunity to get herself killed. At 17, Vida might have been the perfect trainee, the standard to which the League held the rest of the freak kids, but the one thing she had never been able to master was her own adrenaline. Don't you ever touch me again, bitch, Vida snarled, her voice low with fury. She started backing away to follow them down the stairs. You are such a fucking coward that you think you're going to take this lying down? You don't care that he just disrespected us? You. The stairwell reared up under my feet, as if I was dragged in a deep breath only to let it explode back out. The shock of it seemed to slow time itself. I was up and off my feet, launched so hard into the door that I thought I felt a dent beneath my skull. Vida slammed into the ground, covering her head, and it was only then that the roar of the concussion grenade reached us as it blew apart the entrance below. The smoky heat was thick enough to get a stranglehold on me, but the disorientation was so much worse. My eyelids felt like they had been peeled and rubbed raw as I forced them open. The crimson light pulsed through the dark, pushing through the clouds of cement debris. The muffled throbbing in my ears, that wasn't my heartbeat. That was the alarm. Why had they used the grenade when they knew the code for the door would be the same one as the one outside? There hadn't been any gunfire. We were close enough that we would have heard the TAC team engage them. Now everyone would know we were there. It didn't make sense for the team of professionals. I ripped my mask away from my face, clawing at my right ear. There was a sharp stabbing pain, and the comm unit came away in pieces. I pressed a gloved hand against it as I stumbled up to my feet, blinking back one sickening wave of nausea after another. But when I turned to Vida to drag her back up the stairs and into the freezing Pennsylvania night, she was gone. I spent 2 terrified heartbeats searching for her body through the gaping hole in the stairwell's landing. Watching as the tactical team steamed past, I leaned against the wall and tried to stay on my feet. Vida! I felt the words leave my throat, but it vanished under the pulsing in my ears. Vida! The door on my landing was mangled, dented, singed, but it worked, apparently. It groaned and began to slide open, only to catch halfway when a horrible grating noise. I threw myself back against the wall, taking 2 steps up the fractured stairs. The darkness tucked me back under its covers just as the first soldier squeezed through the door, his handgun swinging around the cramped space. I took a deep breath and dropped into a crouch. It took 3 blinks to clear my vision, and by then the soldiers were fighting through the doorway, jumping over the jagged hole in the platform and continuing down the stairs. I watched 4 go, then 5, then 6, swallowed by the smoke. A series of strange buzzing pops seemed to follow, and it wasn't until I was standing, swiping my arm over my face, that I realized it was gunfire from below. Vida was gone. The TAC team was now deep in the hornet's nest of their own making, in prisoner 27. God damn it, I thought, moving back down into the landing. There were upwards of 20 or 30 soldiers staffing these bunkers at any given time. They were too small to house more than that, even temporarily. But just because the corridor was empty now, it didn't mean the firelight below had drawn all the attention away. If I were caught, that would be it. I'd be finished, killed one way or another. But there was the man I had seen, the one with the hood over his head. I didn't feel any particular loyalty to the Children's League. There was a contract between us, a strange verbal agreement that was as businesslike as it was bloody. Outside of my own team, there weren't people to care about, and there certainly wasn't anyone who cared about me beyond the bare minimum of keeping me alive and available to inflict on their targets like a virus. My feet weren't moving, not yet. There was something about the scene that kept replaying over and over in my mind. It was the way they had bound his hands, how they had led prisoner 27 down into the dark unknown of the bunker. It was the gleam of guns, the improbability of escape. I felt despair rising in me like a cloud of steam, spreading itself through my body. I knew what it felt like to be a prisoner, to feel time catch and stop, because every day you lost a little bit more hope that your situation would change, that someone would come help you. And I thought that if one of us could just get to him, to show him we were there before the op failed, it would be worth the try. But there was no safe way down there, and the firelight below was raging in a way only automatic weapons could. Prisoner 27 would know people were there, and they weren't able to reach him. I had to shake that compassion. I had to stop thinking these adults deserved any kind of pity, especially League agents. Even the new recruits reeked of blood to me. If I stayed here, right where Rob ordered me to, I might never find Vita. But if I left and disobeyed him, he'd be furious. Maybe he'd want you to be standing here when the explosion went off, a small voice whispered in the back of my mind. Maybe he was hoping. No, I wasn't going to think about that now. Vita was my responsibility. Not Rob, not Prisoner 27. Goddamn Vita the Viper. When I was out here, when I found Vita, when we were safely back at HQ, I'd play the situation out in my mind again. Not now. My ears were still thrumming with their own pulse, too loud for me to hear the heavy steps coming from the lookout post in the laundromat. We literally crashed into each other as my hand brushed the outside door. This soldier was a young one. If I had been going on appearances alone, I would have thought he was only a few years older than me. Ryan Davidson, my brain filled in, coughing up all sorts of useless information from the mission file. Texas born and bred, National Guard since college had closed, art history major. It was one thing, though, to have someone's life printed in crisp black letters and laid out in front of you. It was something else entirely to come face to face with this actual flesh and blood, to feel the hot stink of breath and see the pulse jump in his throat. Hey! He reached for the gun at his side, but I launched a foot at his hand and sent the weapon clattering across the landing and down the stairs. We both dove for it. My chin hit the silver metal, and the impact actually jarred my brain. For a single blinding second, I saw nothing but pristine white flash in front of my eyes. And then, everything returned in brilliant bright color. The pain filtered through next, when the soldier tackled me and I hit the floor. My teeth sank into my bottom lip, and I burst open. Blood sprayed across the stairwell. The guard pinned me to the ground with his entire weight. The instant I felt him shift, I knew he was going for his radio. I could hear the chatter from the woman, and I heard her say, "Report status," and "I'm coming up." And the knowledge of just how badly I would be screwed if either of those things actually happened sent me into what the instructor Johnson liked to call controlled panic. Panic, because the situation seemed to be escalating quickly. Controlled, because I was the predator in the situation. One of the hands was pinned under my chest, and the other was behind my back and my stomach. That was the one I chose. I bunched up his uniform as best I could, searching for bare skin. My brain's wandering fingers reached out for his head and pried their way in, one at a time. They fought through the memory of my startled face behind the door, moody blue images of women dancing only on dimly lit stages, a field, another man launching his fist at him. Then the weight was off. The air came flooding back into my lungs, cold and stale. I rolled over onto my shoulders and knees, gasping for more of it. The figure standing over me had tossed him down the stairs like a crumpled piece of paper. Up, we have to. The words sounded like they were being carried along underwater. If it hadn't been for the strands of shocking violet hair sticking out from under her ski mask, I probably wouldn't have recognized Vita at all. Her dark shirt and pants were torn, and she seemed to be moving with some kind of limp, but she was alive, and there, and mostly in one piece. I heard her voice through the muffled ringing in my ears. "Jesus, you're slow," she was shouting to me. "Let's go." She started down the stairs, but I grabbed the scruff of her Kevlar vest and pulled her back. "We're going outside. We'll cover the entrance from there. Is your comm still working?" "They're still fighting down there," she shouted. "They can use us. He said not to leave our post." "Then consider it an order from me." And she had to, because that was the only way this worked. That was the only way that was what she hated most about me, about all of this, that I had the deciding vote, that I got to make this call. She spat at my feet, but I felt her following me back up the stairs, cursing beneath her breath. The thought occurred to me that she could easily take her knife and slash it through my spine. The soldiers I met outside clearly hadn't been expecting me. I raised a hand, reaching out for hers to command her away, but the sound of Vita's gun firing over my shoulder rocketed me back and away from the soldiers so much faster than the splatter of blood from her neck did. "None of that bullshit," Vita said, lifting the gun, still somehow strapped to my side, and pushing it into my palm. "Go." My fingers curved around its familiar shape. It was the typical service weapon, a black Sig Sauer P229 DAC that still, after months of learning to shoot them and clean them and assemble them, felt too big in my hands. We burst into the night. I tried to grab Vita again to slow her down before she ran into a blind situation, but she shrugged me off hard. We started at a run up the narrow alley. I hit the corner just in time to see 3 soldiers, singed and bleeding, hauling 2 hooded figures up out of what looked like nothing more than a large street drain. The access point definitely wasn't op folder we were given. Prisoner 27? I couldn't be sure. The prisoners they were loading into the van were men, about the same height. There was a chance. And that chance was about to get in that van and drive away forever. Vita pressed a hand to her ear, her lips compressing to white. Rob saying he wants us back inside. He needs backup. She was already turning back when I grabbed her again. For the first time maybe ever, I was just that tiny bit faster. Our objective is to prisoner 27, I whispered, trying to phrase it in a way that would connect her stupid loyal sense to duty to the organization. And I think that's him. This is what Alvin sent us for, and if he gets away, the whole op is blown. He, Vita protested, then sucked back whatever word was on her lips. Her jaw clenched, but she gave me the tiniest of nods. I'm not going down with your ass if you sink us, just FYI. It'll be all my fault, I said. Nothing against your record. No blemish on her pristine op history, no scarring the trust Alvin and Kate had had in her. It was a win-win situation for her either. She'd get the glory of a successful op, or she'd get to watch me punished and humiliated. I kept my eyes on the scene in front of us. There were 3 soldiers, manageable with weapons, but in order to really be useful, I needed to get close enough to touch them. That was the single frustrating limit to my abilities. I still hadn't been able to break through, no matter how much practice I had forced on me from the League. The invisible fingers that lived inside my skull were tapping patiently, as if disgusted that they couldn't break out of their own anymore. I stared at the nearest soldier, trying to imagine the longest snaking fingers grasping out, stretching across the tile, and reaching the unguarded mind. Clancy could do this, I thought. He didn't need to touch people to get a grip on their minds. I swallowed a scream of frustration. We needed something else, a distraction, something that could. Vita was built with a strong back and powerful limbs that made even her most dangerous acts seem graceful and easy. I watched her raise the gun and steady her aim. Abilities, I hissed. Vita, no guns. It'll alert the others. She looked back at me like she was watching my scrambled brains run out of my nose. Shooting them was a quick fix. We were both well aware of that. But if she missed and hit one of the prisoners, or if they started firing back, Vita lifted her hand, blowing out a single irritated breath, then shoved her hands through the air. The 3 National Guardsmen were picked up with such accuracy and strength that they were tossed halfway down the block, against the cars parked there, because it wasn't enough that Vita was physically the fastest or strongest, or had the best aim out of all of us. She had to have the best control over her abilities, too. I let the feeling part of my brain switch off. The most valuable skill to the Children's League taught me was to purge fear and replace it with something that was infinitely colder. Call it calm, call it focus, call it numb nerves. It came, even with blood singing in my veins as I ran toward the prisoners. They smelled like vomit, blood, and human filth, so different from the clean, neat lines of the bunker and its bleach stench. My stomach heaved. The closer prisoner huddled near the gutter, bound arms up over his head. His shirt hung in pieces off his shoulders, framing welts and burns and bruises that made his back look more like a plate of raw meat than flesh. The man turned toward the sound of my feet, lifting his face from the safety of his arms. I ripped the hood off his head. I had stepped up with words of reassurance on my tongue, but the sight of him had disconnected my mouth from my brain. Blue eyes squinted at me under a scraggly mop of blonde hair. I couldn't do anything, say anything, not when he leaned farther into the pale yellow streetlight. Move, dumbass. What's the holdup? I felt every ounce of blood leave my body in a single blow, fast and clean, like I had been shot straight through the heart. And suddenly I knew. I understood why Kate had originally fought so hard to get me reassigned to a different mission, why I had not been told to enter the bunker, why I hadn't been given any information on the prisoner himself. Not a name, not a description, and certainly no warning. Because the face I was looking at now was thinner, drawn, and battered, but it was one I knew, one that I, not him, I thought, feeling the world shift sideways under my feet, not him. Seeing my reaction, he stood slowly, a rogue smile fighting past his grimace of pain. He struggled up to his feet and staggered towards me, looking torn, I thought, between relief and urgency. But the southern lit of his accent was as warm as ever. Even as it even if his voice was deeper, rougher when he finally spoke. Do I look as pretty as I feel? And I swear, I felt time slide out from under me. Chapter 3. For whatever reason, Jude had nominated himself to serve as the team's one-man welcoming committee. When I arrived back at HQ after my first op with the League, it had been his lanky pacing shape waiting for me at the end of the entry hall, torpedoing toward me, burying me under an avalanche of questions. 6 months later, he was still the only one who waited for us, rewarding our safe return with a smile that split his face. I braced myself for impact as Vita tapped her ID against the door. Rob and the remaining members of the tag team had escorted Cole Stewart in a few minutes before, but I was forced to hang back, take our time going down the tunnel. It was important to make sure Rob got the full credit for this one, to let him roll around in the glory like a dog in the grass. We'd heard the cheers go up as they strolled through the entry and watched them pump their fists as they strode into HQ, almost leaving Cole behind in his wheelchair. Now there was no one left in the long white entry hall. The agents left a trail of celebratory noise behind them. It shrank with every step they took, until the only thing I could hear was my own breathing, and the only thing I could see was the empty space at the end of the hallway, where Jude should have been. Oh, thank you, Jesus, Vita said, stretching her arms over her head. One day I won't have to get my back realigned from his death grip. Adios, Boo. I think some people use the nickname Boo as a term of endearment. Vita used it to make you feel like one of those little dogs that have brains the size of thumbs and piddle all over themselves when they get too excited. I let her go without a word, heading left toward Kate and the other senior agent quarters to check in. 5 minutes of fruitless knocking later, I ducked my head into the atrium to see if she was there. She was probably with the others, I thought, scanning the near empty space, and while I didn't glimpse her white blonde hair at one of the tables, I did recognize the mop of reddish brown curls parked in front of one of the TVs. I wasn't lucky enough to pull off a clean getaway. Those 2 seconds of staring had been enough for him to register my gaze. Jude glanced down at his old plastic wristwatch and then back up at me again in horror. Rue, he called, waving me forward. I'm so sorry, so sorry. I totally lost track of time. Did everything go okay? Did you get back just now? Where's Vita? Is she? I wasn't a good enough person to say that no part of me wanted to turn and run out before he could come up and loop my arm through his, dragging me across the room with him. It was only then, when I crossed the room, that I noticed Nico was there, sitting at the opposite end of the table. One of the cement pillars had blocked the sight of him from the door. But it also didn't help that the kid didn't seem to be moving at all. I followed his stony gaze down to the little device on the table, a chatter. It was the size of a phone and could easily have doubled for one if you weren't casting too careful of an eye on it. They'd salvaged an older generation of phones, the kind with an actual keypad rather than a sleek touchscreen. The new shells they'd created for them were oval and thin enough to slide into the back pocket or up a sleeve during a lesson. A couple of Greens had developed this little gem with the idea that agents could relay digital messages, photos, and short videos back home without needing to ditch burner phone after burner phone. The tech behind them was mostly a mystery to me, but I understood they communicated on some unhackable network the Greens had developed. They could only be used to contact other chatters on the network, and only then if you had the other chatter's secret PIN number. They were useless if you needed to send larger images or video files longer than 30 seconds. Albin had rejected the idea of sending them out on the field for that reason, dismissing them as some bored kids project. As far as I knew, the Greens usually just used them now to chat with one another in HQ when they were in different training sessions or at night after lights out. Really come back? Did you get to meet the agent? Was he as badass as everyone says? Can we? What's going on? I asked, looking between Nico and the TV screen. They'd picked the one showing only local California weather and news. It was like I sucked the words straight out of him. Jude tensed in that wide eyed way of his before flashing the kind of smile that was trying too hard. What's going on? I repeated. Jude swallowed, glancing at Nico before leaning down to my ear. His eyes were scanning the atrium like they were looking for dark corners that didn't exist. They sent Blake Howard out on an op, he said. We're just Blake Howard, the green kid from Team 1? The one who looked like you could take him out with one well aimed sneeze? Jude nodded. I gave another nervous glance behind me. I'm just worried, you know? Nico is too. Shocker. Nico was never one to pass up a good conspiracy theory, especially when it came to the League. Every agent was a double agent. Albin was actually working with Gray to bring down the federal coalition. Someone was poisoning our water supply with lead. I don't know where he got it from, or if it was just the way his brain was processing all of the information he was absorbing and he didn't know how to shut it off. They must be trading him for something, Nico said, gripping the chatter. For information? To get another agent back? That's not so crazy, right? There have been so many Greens here already. They hate having so many of us. They hate us. I tried not to roll my eyes. Did the op involve tech? I asked. Well, yeah, but, Jude said, when have they ever sent out a Team 1 kit? They're supposed to be for HQ use only. He wasn't wrong. Vita called them the Squeakers, and the name had stuck with everyone. All Greens were supercharged with logic and reasoning skills that the League put to use in deciphering codes and building computer viruses, creating these insane devices. They all had the same stumbling walk, Nico too, a weird half step where they dragged their feet against the tile, causing their sneakers to make these little squeaking noises. I'm sure they picked it up from one another subconsciously. They were always moving in sync, just like parts of a working machine should. He's of age, and he has the right skill set to help them, I said. I know for a fact that the other green teams were occupied this week. He might have been a sort of last resort. No, Jude said. We think they picked him on purpose. They wanted him. It was a while before Jude built up the nerve to look at me again. When he did, his expression was so obviously ashamed and terrified that I felt myself soften just enough to ask, Is there something you're not telling me? What am I missing here? Jude twisted the stretched out hem of his shirt into a knot. Nico only stared straight ahead, eyes unblinking as they fixed on the chatter. Me, Nico, and Blake, Jude began. The three of us were messing around a few days ago down here. We were trying to build one of those remote control cars from leftover computer parts. Okay. Nico had to go up and talk to Kate, but me and Blake took the car for a test drive on the floor. It was around 2 in the afternoon and no one was down here, so we thought it would be fine and that we wouldn't bother anyone. But, you know those rooms that we use to store things for ops? Like the vests, extra ammo, and stuff? I nodded. We heard voices coming from one of them. I thought maybe the guys were just playing a card game or something. They do that down here so they can badmouth Alvin or one of the advisors, Jude said, visibly shaking now. But when I heard them, they were actually saying they weren't playing a game, Rue. They were talking about us. It was Rob and Jarvin and a couple of their friends. They kept saying things like reducing the freak population and getting Alvin back on track and how they were going to prove what a waste of time and resources we were. It was a chill that sank straight to the bone. I pulled out the nearest chair and dragged it closer to Nico. Jude did the same, his hands twisting around each other. And they caught you listening? I know it's stupid, but when I heard that, I freaked out. I didn't mean to, but I dropped the car. We ran before the door opened, but I'm positive they saw us. I heard Rob call my name. Then what? I pressed. My mind was making connections now, dangerous ones. Then Blake got assigned to that op, even though he's on Team 1. Jarvin said that they needed a green to hack into the company's server room, and he didn't have a choice. I leaned back slowly, reduced the freak population. My ear, the one that had been taking the brunt of the grenade's blast, seemed to have a pulse of its own. That was an accident, I told myself. Rob was just being reckless. But the second lie sounded less convincing than the first. Reduce the freak population. How? By putting them in deadly situations on ops that could be waved off as accidents? Rob had killed kids before. I only knew of the two that I saw a glimpse of in his memory, but what's to say there weren't more? Jesus. A blinding wave of nausea blasted up my stomach. Did he kill them to keep the number of kids here down? No, no. I needed to stop. My thoughts were spiraling and getting out of hand. This was Jude and Nico.
Two boys with too much free time to sit around and trade nightmares. They were constantly poking at trouble, then acted all shocked when it turned around and bit them in the asses. It's just a coincidence, I said. I had another point to make, I'm sure, but it unhooked from the chain of thoughts when I heard someone call my name from across the room. One of Albin's advisors, good old Raccoon Face, stood in the atrium's doorway. He'd like to speak to you in his office in an hour from now. Then he turned on his heel and was gone. Clearly angry, he was tasked to play messenger. What does he want? Jude asked, visibly confused. You almost never saw the walking suits more than a few feet away from Albin. I wouldn't have been surprised if they broke into his quarters every night and took turns whispering plans and sweet nothings in his ear while he slept. There were 10 men total, all over the age of 50, who had divided up the areas of Albin's focus and assumed control over each. They coordinated and approved ops, brought in supplies and new contacts, recruited new trainers, managed the league's finances. Also, Albin could focus on big picture goals and targets. Jude claimed that they were only there because Gray wanted them dead for one reason or another, and they had no choice but to go underground. I still didn't know half of their names, and since most made a point to never directly engage with PSI freaks, it was easier just to fixate on their features and nickname them from there. Raccoon face, monkey ears, horse teeth, and frog lips were the ones I saw the most. What the names lacked in creativity, they made up for in accuracy. A belief? A debrief already? Jude asked, glancing at the TV again. I reached over and manually flipped the machine off. Hey, you're late, I said, pointing to the clock on the wall. Another 2 minutes and Instructor Johnson will hit you with a demerit. So, Jude shot back, this is more important. More important than eventually being activated, I said. Because the last time I checked, you were 2 demerits away from being stuck in HQ support forever. It was meant to be a tactic to play. Nico's fuming look told me as much, but he knew, probably better than I did, that a future in which Jude never got to go out on an op was a future Jude would have been sold both arms to avoid. I walked them out, tailing them all the way to the training room in case they got any ideas of slipping away. The teams we usually trained with, 2, 3, and 4, were already there, warming up, darkening the walls of mirrors. This was one part in all of HQ that actually smelled fully human. The stench of sweat and warm bodies gave this hall a jolt of real tangible life. It was better than the mildew, at least. Instructor Johnson nodded in my direction as I held the door open. The fluorescent lights bleaching his already blonde hair. Both Vita and I were excused from lessons and training for the day, but tomorrow they'd start all over again for us. I'd fall back into this place's pattern, grateful for the relief of not needing to think about anything other than moving from hour to hour, door to door. A life lesson on how to cope, courtesy of Thurmond. Jude and Nico could both hate me for this. I didn't care. I just couldn't afford to feed into their fear and let it twist my own. I'd worked so hard to numb myself of this place that they didn't get to blow that apart. They got my attention, my concerns, my protection, but they didn't get that. Showered, fed, clothed, and changed, and thoughts collected, I was ready to meet with John Albin, but he wasn't ready for me. There's a lot you could say about the League's founder, and maybe 2 words of it were actually flattering. He was a smart man, no one was going to deny it. The League was what it was today because of him. It was just that some felt it was time for him to take assaults against Gray to a new level, and others were pressing for him to hold course, since it's working. I thought he had every right to want to think more about such a huge decision, but I understood their impatience. I knew they wanted to capitalize on the growing discontent and murmurs of protest we'd been tracking. I heard voices beyond the door, soft at first, then inflamed enough to catch my attention. Every intention I had of knocking fell apart the longer I stood there, listening. No, Alvin was saying. My God, no, no. How many times do I need to repeat the word for it to join your vocabulary? It was the answer the first time you presented it to the senior staff, when you convinced Jarvin to present it to the advisors, and yes, now. You're not thinking this through. I rocked back on my heels instinctively, away from Rob's harsh voice. You think we can keep this up without making a big statement? How many of these things do you just have sitting around HQ, wasting our time and energy? Albin cut him off. They are not things, as you, I'm sure, are well aware. This is non-negotiable. The ends will never justify the means, no matter how you try to pitch this. Never. They are children. In the back of my mind, a thought was beginning to knot itself with another, darker one, but I forced my attention to stay here, now. You're the one who's always saying anything to get Gray out, aren't you? The distraction would be more than enough to get for us to go in and dismantle the camps, blast the news out to the rest of the damn country. This is the only way in now. They've wised up to our forged IDs. We can't even get in to extract the agents we have embedded in the camps. They're waiting for us. We're all waiting for you to do something, decide something. There was a long, bitter silence that followed. Whatever words Albin was looking for, he never found them. I couldn't keep my own mind in check. What kind of plan could you get him this worked up? I'm just warning you, Rob continued, sounding calmer, that even I've heard agents wondering about what kind of policy we're moving toward. A good number still think that you want to rekindle things with Gray in the end, that you miss your friend. I closed my eyes, and it was an unspoken rule that we didn't bring up Albin's former friendship with President Gray and the First Lady for any reason. Kate told me once that Albin didn't even like to be reminded of the work he'd done as Secretary of Homeland Security, so I imagined he wasn't thrilled to be reminded he was once in a small circle of people who enjoyed private dinners in the executive residence of the White House. A new voice chimed in. John, let's not dismiss this entirely. This is a tactic that's been employed before. It is effective. They wouldn't know. We have ways of hiding the mechanism. I was so focused on the conversation in front of me that I didn't hear the person who hobbled up behind me, not until he was hovering at my back, tapping on my shoulder to get my attention. I'd keep this one to yourself, Keyhole Kate, Cole said. Or do you need to hear the old one about that pesky cat and his curiosity? It was too late to jump back and pretend I hadn't been listening, and now I was too flustered to bother trying. The medic on Rob's team had done a good job patching up the deeper cuts on Cole's face, cleaning away the filth from his skin. He was wearing a loose shirt and pants that were a number of sizes too big for him, but he was out of his old vomit-stained rags, at least. He looked like a different person, and I was grateful for it. It was easier to get a look at him, and I finally was getting a good one. When Liam had told me he had an older brother, I had imagined him to be much older, 25 or 26, the same age as Kate, but I'd overheard some of Rob's tact team complaining about him on the flight back, about his punk-ass attitude, about how he was only 21, but Albin wasted all the good ops on him, the little golden boy. 3 years, that was all that separated him from Ian. Cole was a member of that narrow generation that had been just old enough to avoid the disease's grip. Didn't get much of a chance to talk on the plane, did we? He said, bandaged fingers brushing the damp hair back over his shoulder. He had a few inches on his brother, which I became well aware of as he leaned down to study my face, a pirate's smile working across his own. Cole might have been narrower through the shoulders and waist, but there was something familiar about this stance. I shook my head, trying to clear the flush from my cheeks as I knocked on the door. It brought the argument inside to an abrupt end. Albin rose from behind his dark wood desk as I came in, shutting his laptop and cutting off the low murmur of the radio scanners on the nearby table. Rob was the Rob and the frog-lipped advisor were already standing, both of their faces flushed from argument. Seeing us, Rob rolled his eyes up and away, leaning against one of Albin's many shelves and useless knickknacks from his old life. Sir, I said, you wanted to see me? Goodness, sit down, Albin said, waving a hand toward one of the folding chairs opposite him. You both look dead on your feet. I'm fine, I said, then added, thank you. As an afterthought, I hated how small my voice became around him. Hated it. Albin settled back down into his seat, lips pulled back to reveal a smile mostly of yellow teeth. The man didn't make it out that much in public, not with a hefty bounty on his head. If they needed him to make a recorded video speech, they always cleaned up his pock-marked skin and brightened his complexion in post-production. They also liked to Photoshop him into pictures of American landscapes or cities to give the impression that he was a lot more fearless about going outside than he actually was. I'd like to have a casual debriefing about the operation to retrieve Agent Stewart last night. If the three of you are agreeable, I don't think it can wait. He waited until Cole had eased himself down into the chair next to mine before reaching across the desk to clasp his hand. I can't tell you how good it is to see your face again, my dear boy. Well, lucky you. Cole dragged the words out, and no short of bitterness. Seems like you'll be seeing a lot of this beautiful boy from now on. Cut it out, I told myself. Before I could tense, Cole was not Liam, no matter how much alike they looked, no matter how similar their voices were. Focus on the differences. Cole was more solidly built than Liam, and cleaner cut, too. He buzzed his hair down since I'd last seen him, making it look 2 shades darker than the blonde I knew it was. Liam, the Liam I had known, was scruffy around the edges, warm in every way imaginable. And here was his older brother, stiff and beaten within an inch of his life, looking like he had been carved from ice, not looking all that different from the state I'd left Liam in. And it was so awful, so horrible how quickly my mind swapped in one brother for the other, how much it lifted my spirit and eased the tightness in my chest to imagine Liam was here next to me again. Stop it. Froglip shut the door and retreated to the corner of the small room, slipping into Albin's shadow. Would never normally interrupt your recuperation, Albin was saying, but after hearing Agent Meadows' oral report, it sounds like there was some, shall we say, confusion. I'm interested to hear what happened from your perspective, Ruby. I didn't register he had spoken to me at all until Rob pushed himself off the bookcase, the wide expanse of his shoulders spreading as he took a deep breath. Before leaving on the op, he'd buzzed his dark hair short again. It made the bones of his face more pronounced. It changed the way the shadows fell against his skin. God, why are we doing this? Where was Kate? I was never debriefed without her, and never here in Albin's office, behind a closed door. I was surprised by how anxious I was. I didn't trust her. But somewhere along the way, I guess I'd gotten used to her silent, steady presence waiting to catch me if I tripped up. Are we waiting for anyone else? I asked, careful to keep my voice steady. Albin understood my question. This is just a casual talk, Ruby. The level of secrecy surrounding this op means we can't hold the debriefing in front of the whole organization. You should feel free to speak your mind. I pressed my hands down on my knees, trying to keep them from bouncing. Agent Meadows, I started, sounding too loud in my own ears, ran through the mission parameters with us on the flight, laying out the objective and what we knew about this particular bunker's layout. He also reminded us of the fallback plans we had discussed prior to leaving. Alvin's mouth was wide and fairly unskilled at hiding his feelings. One corner twitched up. And did any of these fallback plans include you and Vita leaving the bunker? No, sir, I said. Agent Meadows ordered us to hold our position in the stairwell to cover them from there. Albin placed his elbow on the table and leaned his chin against his fingers. Can you explain, then, why you left? I didn't turn to look at Rob, but I knew he was looking at me. Everyone was. And from the weight of their stares, I got the impression that Meadows had already answered this question himself. If I get Rob in trouble, I thought, how much trouble will I be in? He had a hot temper, and I had known he'd be angry even when I made the choice to stay outside with Vida. But it would be nothing compared to his fury if I sold him out and told the others about what happened on the stairs. I couldn't let them see the creeping suspicions on my face. I couldn't ask the questions I wanted to. Why didn't you warn us? My comm had been working then. I would have heard him. The stairwell was compromised. I gave Vita the order to leave so we could monitor the situation from outside. And you didn't tell me because? Rob asked, his anger already betraying him. My comm was broken, I said, as you saw when we regrouped. He grunted. All right, Albin said after a moment. The stairwell was compromised? How so? There was a grenade. Rob set off a grenade. 9 words. One perfect way to ensure Rob would be forced to swallow every ounce of bitter reprimanding he deserved. Albin would believe me. He had never, not once, doubted my word, had defended it even to his advisers after I'd pulled some unwanted news out of an unfortunate mind. 9 words to tell him the truth, that Rob had jacked his own op, by sheer stupidity or intentionally, and came within a hair's width of killing both me and Vita. I don't know how I knew, or why I felt so sure of it. It was as certain as the blood thundering in my ears. If I nailed him on this, embarrassed him, the next time he had me in his sights, he wouldn't miss. It was, it wasn't well built, and it collapsed, I explained. It couldn't handle the weight of all of us at once. Crappy construction. All right, Albin said, drawing the words out. Agent Stewart reported that it was you and Vita who actually retrieved him. How did that come to pass? She and the other one completely ignored my order to return to the bunker, that's how, Rob said. I know for a fact she heard it. I know that you were the one who refused to double back. All four men had turned toward me, my vision narrowed, black seeping in again at the edges. I pressed a hand to my throat, pulling at the tight collar, trying to free the breath that was caught there. I wanted Liam. All I wanted was Liam right there, standing close enough for me to breathe in the leather, the smoke, the sweet grass. Ruby, Albin said, his voice calm and deep and patient as the sea. Will you please answer my question? I just wanted this to be over. I wanted to go back to the sleeping room, crawl into my bunk in the cold darkness, and drift into nothing. He's right. I told Vita to disregard the orders. Once we went above ground, I saw that the National Guardsmen were moving the prisoners out of the entrance we didn't know about. I didn't ask for permission to proceed. I know I should have. Because you goddamn know the only thing you're supposed to do is follow your leader's orders, Rob barked. You think we would have lost so many men if you'd been up there to cover our escape? The TVs behind Albin were off, but I could swear I could hear their static breath growing louder and louder the longer the man stayed silent. He pressed a hand to the top of my head, but didn't once tear his gaze away from me. Of his head, but didn't once tear his gaze away from me. Then Cole's voice, southern as sweet tea. Well, thank God you disobeyed, otherwise I'd be halfway to hell by now. It was clear that I had underestimated just how much influence Cole actually carried in the organization. Influence wasn't the right word for it. A sway, maybe. That was mostly charm backed up by the deadly results. Albin's eyebrows rose, but he only nodded, allowing Cole to continue. I mean, let's call a spade here, Cole said, leaning back to make himself more comfortable. She's the one who got me out. Why would she be in trouble? She disobeyed my direct orders. Cole dismissed Rob with a bored wave. I mean, Christ, look at the poor girl. She got the shit beat out of her on my behalf. If you think I'm going to stay quiet and let her take the blame for a mission that wasn't, by the way, a failure, you have another thing coming. No one spoke. I stared openly at Cole's smug expression, then at Rob's murderous one. The sliver of space between them filled more than just distrust and annoyance. There were years of history resting there, colored with hatred I didn't understand. The tension in Albin's face bled off like running rain until he too was smiling. The inclination to agree I'm inclined to agree with Agent Stewart here. Ruby, thank you for thinking so fast on your feet. Albin shuffled a few papers around on his desk. Agent Meadows, I'll review your full report this evening. For now, you're dismissed. When the senior agent stood, so did I, swinging toward the door for a quick escape. Instead, Albin's voice caught me. Just one more thing, Ruby. If you don't mind, I'd like to discuss something with you and Cole. Let me go, let me go, let me go. Rob did not like this. That much was clear. But he also had no choice. The door shut so hard behind me, it actually rattled the old glass Coke bottles lining the shelves over it. Now, on a different note, Albin looked my way. I should begin by saying that you're being trusted here, my dear, well above your security clearance. If I hear a word about this conversation being breathed outside of these office walls, there will be consequences. The same rules apply here as downstairs. No, please not this. Please don't let it be this. Yes, sir. Satisfied, he turned to Cole. I meant what I said before. I'm sorry to have to do this before you fully recovered, but, as you're well aware, we need to retrieve the intel that was taken from you. I am well aware, Cole said, but I told you, I don't know who has it. They locked me out, and I saw someone take it, but truthfully, sir, I don't remember much beyond what happened after they got me to the bunker. I'm not sure it was my contact who picked it up. I watched him drag a bandaged hand over his closed, cropped blonde hair, wondering if it was as obvious to Albin as it was to me that he wasn't telling the truth. And that's understandable considering the circumstances, Albin said, leaning back in his chair. He threaded his fingers together and rested them over the bulge on his stomach. This is where Ruby comes in. She's been instrumental in helping to jog the memories of assets. She's helped us track down more than one piece of information that's gone astray. Please, 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 not him. I didn't want to see inside his mind. I didn't want to see flashes of Liam or their life. I just wanted to get away from him before my shrinking ribcage shredded my heart. Cole went pale under his tan, from the creases between his brows down to the fingers clenching the armrests of the plastic chair. Oh, come on now, Albin laughed. I've been told it's completely painless. And if it's not, we'll have her stop immediately.
That I didn't doubt. Even if I went rogue and didn't release Cole's mind, all of the advisors and senior agents carried these handheld speakers that functioned like miniature white noise machines. You're the first to volunteer to jump off bridges and infiltrate the PSFs, and you can't let a girl take a quick peek inside your memories for the good of your family here, for the good of your country? Albin's smile never wavered, despite all of his needling. Clever, I thought. The do it for your glorious country speech was one step above a direct order, and Cole was smart enough to realize how much better it would look if he agreed by his own free will. All right, Cole had finally said, turning to look at me. What do you need me to do? It was several moments before I found my voice, but I was proud of how strong it sounded. Give me your hand. Be gentle with me, sweetheart, Cole said, his fingers giving a slight twitch as they touched mine. Albin laughed outright at this, but Cole blew out an uneven breath and closed his eyes. His hand was ice cold and slick to the touch. I tried to ignore the insistent press of his thumb against mine. I'd always felt like Liam's hand swallowed mine when he held it, but this one was somehow bigger. The rough palms with the kind of calluses that only came from years of being shredded by weights and weapons and fights. The way the fingers on his left hand kept twitching every few minutes. I didn't want to think about any of it. I kept my eyes on his left hand, the two fingers that twitched now and then as he quietly fought through the pain of his injuries. Try to relax, I said. Can you tell me what it is I'm looking for? What it is, what size, what color, as detailed as you can possibly get. Cole's eyes were still closed. A standard size flash drive, a little black stick about the length of my thumb. I had done this so many times over the last 6 months, I had no longer felt any kind of pain. But I braced myself anyway. His hand was shaking slightly, or maybe it was mine. I tightened my fingers around his and tried to steady for the both of us. Think back to the last moment you remember having it. Try to bring it to your mind if you can. The breath went out of Cole in two short bursts. It felt like slipping beneath the still surface of a sun warmed river. For all the effort it took to get through his natural defenses, there was nothing cold or still about the smears of colors and shapes streaming past me, but they were moving too fast. Here and there I saw faces or objects, a green apple, a lonesome swing, a small stuffed bear burning in dying grass, a door with a messy "Keep Out" sign scribbled in crayon, almost like he was trying to think of everything but the thing I'd specifically asked for. Cole was practically limp in his chair, his head slowly falling towards my shoulder. I thought I felt him shake it, his hair brushing against my neck. Show me when you lost the memory card, I said quietly, the black flash drive. The memory floated up as quickly as if I had plucked it from the water. A little boy wearing overalls, no more than 2 or 3, sitting in the middle of a sea of top carpet, bawling at the top of his lungs. The flash drive, I said again, the scene smeared down and away, replaced by a nighttime sky and a crackling bonfire that was cast a warm glow over a nearby tent and the dark silhouettes moving inside of it. Philadelphia, I heard Albin say behind me. Philadelphia, Cole. The lab. Cole must have registered the man's voice, because I felt him flinch against me. I pressed harder, plunging my hands into the stream, suddenly worried about what would happen to me if I couldn't produce the kind of results that Albin was after. The flash drive, I thought. Philadelphia. The memory wavered, hovering black and still like a drop of loose ink at the tip of a pen. And with one last shudder, it finally slid free. The scene shifted around me, throwing me into the rainy night. A flash of light cut across the brick wall to my left. Then another. Car headlights. I couldn't hear the squeal of brakes or the accelerator revving, but I was Cole, seeing things as he was seeing them then. And Cole was running. Dirty water and stray garbage flew up around my ankles. I kept one hand against the brick wall, feeling through the dark. The concrete flashed as if something sharp had sparked against it, then again and again, until I knew exactly what was happening. I was being shot at, and their aim was getting better. I took one flying leap up, catching the black ladder of the fire escape and dragging it back down to the ground. My hands were stiff and frozen to the point that I could barely curl them around the bars as I climbed. And still the shooting didn't stop, not until I was rolling onto the rough finish of the roof, catching dust and loose plaster in my hair. Then I was up and off like a shot, jumping from that building's roof onto the next. I saw the ground in the second it took me to soar over it. The flashing red and blue lights of the police car tracked my progress across the buildings like a mocking shadow. Overhead, the wind stirred, plucking at the loose button shirt I wore. I dropped down over the edge of the next building, gasping slightly at the overpowering smell of rotting garbage. I felt my feet hit the rubber lid of the dumpster, and the shock of the impact buckled my knees and hurled me headfirst into the ground. There was a heartbeat, maybe two, but I was too stunned by the pain to actually move. I had just gotten my hands under me when the alleyway flooded with pure white light. You can't move very fast with a limp, and you can't go very far with a dead end at your back. But I scrambled up anyway, bolting for the battered door to my left, letting the soldiers and the police holler what they would after me. My steps were slow but sure, and I knew where I was going. I made sure the door was locked in place behind me. It took 2 precious seconds for my eyes to adjust to the dim hallway. I stumbled up the stairs to 2A, a pale blue door, and shouldered it open. The apartment was lit, coffee was still brewing on the counter, but there was no one inside. I checked every room, under the bed, in the closets, before making my way back out into the hall, reaching for the black jacket hanging there. The building seemed to shake with the force of the boots in the narrow stairwell. My hands shook as they grabbed the jacket, feeling the inside lining, running over the bottom seam in disbelief over and over again. The doors exploded open behind me, and there was no opportunity to move, to fight, to run. I was tackled onto the ground, my arms wrenched behind me and locked there. Chapter 4. How could you? Kate's shrill voice rang out. She hasn't slept in the past 2 days, and you put her through this? I kept my eyes fixed on a small garden statue of a prancing boy half hidden by an American flag hanging by Albin's desk. I was on the floor, flat on my back, but I had no memory of getting there. She is not a trained puppy who will perform tricks for you at the drop of a hat. Kate had a way of yelling without ever raising her voice. She is a child. Please do not solicit her services, as you so eloquently put it, without checking with me first. I think, came Albin's thin reply. That's about all the lecturing I can stand to take from you today, Agent Connor. This child is of age now to make her own decisions, and while she may report to you, you report to me, and I do not ever need to check with you or vet my decisions with you, and I will ask you now very kindly to leave this office before you say something that you will regret. I forced myself off the ground and back into the chair. Kate lunged forward to help me, but I was already there, brushing her off. It looked like she hadn't slept either. Her hair was matted and stringy. Her face was ashen as I'd ever seen it. She had burst in there like a tornado 5 minutes ago, and I hadn't even stopped to take a breath. I don't know who tipped her off, Rob maybe, but the only thing she had accomplished in that time was making me feel like a humiliated 5-year-old. I'm fine, I told her, but she didn't look convinced. I'll wait outside, she said. Then you'll be waiting for some time. We have a guest downstairs that I'd like Ruby to meet. Of course. Why would I get a day off from entertaining the guests? Oh? Cole's gaze shifted among the three of us. Am I invited to this party? Albin stood finally and came around to the front of his desk, standing between Cole's and my chairs. He lowered himself back down on the edge of the desk with care, and it was the first time I had ever been close enough to him to realize he smelt like mildew, and we could never fully scrub from the showers. I'll see you at senior staff meeting, Agent Connor, then in a lower voice. Come prepared. Agent Meadows is bringing his proposal to vote again. Kate whirled on her heels, but her hands half raised, like she could shove the thought of it back at him. She was still shaking when Frog Lips escorted her out. Albin didn't so much as flinch when she slammed the door behind her. So you found our little missing treasure, did you? Kate's interruption had broken into my haze of fury, but just like that, I was free falling back into it, twisting my hands under the desk to keep from wrapping them around Cole's neck. In the end, it hadn't mattered a single bit that I had managed to get the League to cut Liam loose. His brother, apparently, had found some way to drag him back into the thick of things. I didn't really understand what I had seen, which was not, as Albin believed, the flash drive itself, but it was clear enough to me that Liam had somehow been involved. Well, don't keep us in suspense, Albin said. We need to get protection to the informant as soon as possible. or you need to send someone to kill him for it. I just think, Cole began, the one thing, the single solitary gift that Thurman had given me was the ability to lie, with a straight, unflinching face. I didn't recognize them, I said, so I can't give you a name. Maybe if I describe them, Agent Stewart will be able to give you one? Maybe, Cole managed to croak. Then, after clearing his throat, he added, I worked with a lot of people in Philly, though. Albin gave me an impatient wave. His dark, muddy eyes were on mine. It was a woman, I explained. I could see her standing near the PSF's van. She looked nervous and kept glancing around until she saw something on the sidewalk. Then she must have found it. Late into her 40s and a bit heavy set. She had long dark hair and glasses with green frames. Her nose was slightly crooked at the end. And she was also my first grade teacher, Mrs. Rosen. Albin nodded with each and every small bit of description, then turned to Cole. That ring any bells? Yeah, Cole said, his fingers drumming on the armrest. I can work with that. I'll write up the full report for you. Albin nodded. Have it on my desk by 8 tonight. Yes, sir, Cole said, struggling back up to his feet. I was afraid if I looked at him, I'd give myself away. He lingered for a second by the door until Frog Lips ushered him out, too. Albin stood, making his way over to the row of dull, mismatched filing cabinets behind his desk. He slid a ring of keys out of his shirt's front pocket, giving me a small wink. I almost couldn't believe it. Every single time I'd come to his office, I'd stared at those ugly things, wondering what was inside, and now he was actually opening one? He tapped his finger against the nearest drawer. The advisors think it's archaic and backwards for me to keep these, considering we're in the height of our digital game. Isn't that right, Peters? The advisor gave a tight lipped smile. Whatever that they really thought, to me, it was Albin's one old school trick that actually did what it was supposed to. The records or files or whatever he kept in there were only ever going to be seen by one person, him. There was no chance someone would come and hack them or install some kind of backdoor program and download their contents. He'd insisted on installing both a retinal scanner and a digital keypad lock on his office door, the two most expensive pieces of tech at all of HQ. If someone wanted in those files, they'd need his permission or to be very creative. He slid a red folder out of the dented black cabinet at the far right, pushing the drawer shut with his hip as he turned back toward me. I just had a thought, Ruby. I hadn't had a chance to thank you for the excellent work you did pulling this information together about camps. I know you gave it to me a few months ago, but I've only had a few minutes to glance though. I can tell that a lot of effort went into it though, which I admire. I don't know that he'd ever given I don't know that he'd ever actually surprised me before that moment. I'd given up weeks ago on that folder ever catching his attention. When I'd seen only the smallest sliver of a corner sticking out beneath the stack of papers on his desk that was as tall as I was, that was my last hope, I remember thinking, and it was being crushed. Why name an organization the Children's League if you weren't going to pretend to help the kids? The question stayed on me every night, through every class, through every op. I felt its teeth tightening around the back of my neck each time I dismissed without a second look. It had locked its jaw and it wouldn't let me or my subconscious go. Most of the agents, especially the ex-military guys, couldn't have cared less about the camps. They hated Gray, hated the draft, hated having their service orders changed. But this was the only organization that was visible and actually trying to accomplish something aside from sending out vaguely threatening messages every few months. Trying to get them to do anything to help other kids was like shouting in a room where everyone was already screaming. No one wanted to listen because they had their own plans, their own priorities. From the first night at HQ, I knew that the only way I'd be able to face myself in the future was if I tried, as hard as I could, to redirect the League's resources into freeing the kids still in camps. Over the past months, I planned, sketched, and wrote down everything I remembered about Thurman, from the way the PSFs patrolled, to when they rotated, to two camera blind spots we'd recently discovered. It became an addiction in a way. Every time I sat down, it was like being around the fire pit at East River, listening to Liam talk passionately about how we needed to be the ones to help ourselves and one another, that no organization would ever get past its own needs or image to help us. He was right, of course. That had been more than apparent to me over the last 6 months. I believed him, believed in him, but I had also thrown him off his path when we separated, and now I needed to be the one to continue down it. I understand, sir. I've had copies made, he said. We'll discuss it later at our senior staff meeting. I can't make any promises, but after all the hard work you've done for us these past few months, you. I had no idea where that sentence was headed, but I never would. Without bothering to knock, another one of the advisors, Horse Teeth, stuck his head of silver hair in and opened his mouth, only to close it again when he saw me sitting there. Froglips pushed himself off the wall he'd been leaning against and simply said, Snowfall? Horseteeth shook his head. That was what we were afraid of. Damn, Albin swore, standing again. Is Professor alive? Yes. But her work? All three sets of eyes were suddenly turned towards me, and I realized I should have left 30 seconds ago. I'll be in the atrium, I murmured, if you still need me. Albin was the one to wave me off, but it was Froglip's voice that followed me out of the office, carrying through the door as it was shut behind me. I never thought this was a good idea. We warned her. Curiosity kept me standing there, waiting for some kind of hint as to what they were talking about. The man was practically spitting with anger, the words pouring over his oversized lips in a torrent. I tried to remember the last time I had seen one of them so worked up, and couldn't. Jude always joked that they were part robot programmed to do their tasks with the least amount of heart possible. She took precautions. It's not all lost, Albin said calmly. Let it never be said that women let herself be blinded by love. Walk with me, Jarvin. Jarvin will be back, and I need to loop him in. We might have to take the team to Georgia to salvage the mess there. I only needed to hear footsteps approaching from the other side of the door to know I'd gotten what little information they'd be given. I turned to as a cluster of kids passed me on their way to the atrium, letting myself be drawn toward the back of the crowd. When I glanced back, Albin stood outside his office door, letting the advisors work their whispers into a buzz around his ears. He didn't acknowledge me, but I felt his eyes follow me the whole way, like he couldn't quite get me out of his sight. A few hours later, I was still in the atrium, still waiting for a convenient slot in Albin's schedule for me to scramble someone's brain. Nico had shown up a few minutes before and brought a sandwich over to me, but between the two of us, I'm not sure who was less interested in dinner. Snowfall. The League was careful to give code names to every agent and every op. At this point, I knew HQ's roster well enough to know we didn't have a professor working out of Los Angeles. But Snowfall. My brain was turning the phrase over and over, the way it sounded would sound out of a foreign word. Slowly, methodically, I had access to names of classified missions and projects well above my security clearance in the League, just by virtue of the dirty work I was doing for them downstairs. But that wasn't one of them. Hey, I said, glancing over to where Nico was staring at his laptop screen. If I were to give you an op name, would you be able to search the servers for it? Classified servers? He asked. Anything less secure was a waste of the Green's time and talents. Sure. What's the name? Snowfall. I think the agent in charge of it's called Professor. It sounds like a woman who might have been working out of the Georgia headquarters. Nico looked like I had picked up my plastic tray and slammed it into his face. What? What? Have you heard of it? I asked. The agent sitting nearby had gotten up and left when I sat down, giving me my own private section of the dining hall. I had glared at the loud table of blues nearby until they left too, so it was quiet enough for me to actually hear him swallow as he looked back down at his keyboard and then back up at me. It also meant it was quiet enough to hear Jude's panting as he came bursting through the atrium's doors. He bypassed the other tables of agents and kids and came straight toward us. Ignoring him wasn't going to make him disappear. He was the rash that kept coming back, even after 6 different kinds of silent treatment. Hey, Nico said, what are you? I kept my eyes on my untouched sandwich, only looking up when he grabbed both of our arms and started to pull us out of our seats. Come with me, he said in a tight voice. Now. I'm busy, I muttered. Go find Vita. You have to come. His voice was hard and low. I barely recognized it. Right now. Why? I asked, refusing to look up. Blake Howard came back from his op. And I care because. His fingers seemed to burn my skin. He came back in a body bag. By the time we arrived at the entrance hall, the small crowd of spectators, senior agents, Albin, and his advisors were flocking down one level to the infirmary,
in a long line of drawn faces and furious whispering questions. You sure? I asked Jude as we tailed the crowd. Positive that's what you saw? He gulped back down a breath. This close, I saw the red rimming his eyelids, and I wondered if he had cried himself raw before coming to get me. Jude's hand floated up to grip the small, nearby flat silver compass that he wore around his neck with a string. Alban had given it to him out of his personal collection of junk, along with the personal prophecy that Jude would turn into a great explorer and a traveler of the First Order. The kid never took it off, even though his abilities rendered the small device mostly useless. As a yellow, Jude's touch always carried a faint electrical charge that messed with the magnet inside. It meant the colored arm always pointed toward Jude and not the actual direction it was headed. I saw him come in, then Kate made me leave, but I heard Albin asking Agent Jarvin how it could have happened, and Rob said it had been an accident. Jude glanced around us, peering over my head to make sure no one was close enough to hear. Rue, I don't think it was an accident. When we reached the second level landing, Nico blew right past us, heading down to the third lowest level. Hey, Jude called. Nico. Let him go, I said, half wishing I could follow him and avoid this mess altogether. The infirmary was directly behind the atrium, occupying the large circular space on the second level, with the computer lab directly beneath it on the third. Despite its size, it was almost always clogged with machines, beds, and the few nurses and doctors the League kept on staff for emergencies and training accidents. I had to go in more than once to get patched up and hadn't missed the fact that they wore special thick rubber gloves to touch me. Now they wore the usual clear ones as they moved Jarvin and his other teammates in to be examined. Jude tried to go inside, and his breath hitched as he reached for the door handle. I dragged him away to the observation window where the few other agents were crowded, watching as a gurney was navigated through the beds and medical carts toward the screen at the back of the room. On top of it was a black body bag, occupied. I squeezed up to the front of the window with Jude in time to see them unzip the bag and lift Blake Howard onto a flat metal surface. A white sneaker dangled from his right foot, and the blood soaked his clothes was visible. From where we were, and then nothing. Albin stepped through with Jarvin and Kate and Rob, and the screen was drawn back in place, leaving us with only shaded silhouettes. Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god, Jude was whispering, his hands fisting up in his reddish brown curls. It was him. It was really him. I reached out to steady his elbow as he swayed. I hadn't really known Blake at all. I didn't know any of the kids who weren't on my team aside from their names, and my winning personality guaranteed they would never know me. But Jude and Blake had been as thick as thieves. The two of them and Nico spent most of their downtime together, goofing off in the computer lab or playing some kind of game. The only time I had ever seen a smile crack Nico's face was when Blake had been with him, green eyes flashing, hands waving, telling some story that had Jude practically sobbing with laughter. We should go find we should go find Nico, I think. I think he went to check on something. Jude finally managed to get out. I guided him away from the door and down the hall toward the stairs. We had to squeeze past the agents jogging down the hall to confirm the rumors that I'm sure were blazing through HQ. I have to tell you something, he whispered as we reached the stairs. You have to see that I don't think it was an accident. I think I did this. This had nothing to do with you. I sounded so much calmer than I felt. Accidents happen all the time. The only one to blame is Jarvin. He's the one who picked someone who didn't have the full field training. Jude didn't give me a chance to bail. He seized my wrist and dragged me after him all the way down the stairs to the third level. I watched the sharp angles of his shoulders move beneath his ratty old Bruce Springsteen shirt, and I noticed for the first time that he'd worn a hole through the collar. He knew exactly where Nico had gone. It was several hours past our allotted training time in the computer room, but I was still surprised to find it so empty. Usually there were any number of greens haunting the room, typing away at whatever computer program or virus they were perfecting. If it hadn't been a dinner hour, Nico's expression alone probably could have cleared the joint out. I found it, he said, and the words trembled as it left Jude's mouth. It wasn't an accident. Nico was prone to ugly feelings that he chose to deal with inwardly, in what I'm sure were ugly ways, but he never inflicted those bitter, venomous thoughts on the rest of us, not until now. Found what? I asked.
One of you needs to explain what's going on right now. You said it was nothing, Nico said. You thought it was a coincidence. You should have believed us. His voice was acid on my already exposed nerves. I kept my eyes on the screen as he clicked on the video file. The player popped up, expanding to fit the black and white footage. Tiny human shaped figures milled around the room full of long machines. I had seen enough of them to be able to identify it with a single look, a server room. What am I looking at? I asked. Please tell me you weren't stupid enough to download the security footage from the company Blake and Jarvin's team broke into. And give Jarvin and one of his friends a chance to remotely delete the evidence? Nico fired back. It was a 30-second clip. It was all he needed. I wanted to tell him that he had taken a horrible risk in downloading it, that the computer corporation could trace it back to us, but Nico wasn't careless. 30 seconds, but it happened in less than 15. Blake had gone into the server room, dressed in the usual black op attire, and located the machine straight off. The sudden appearance of a guard made me jump. The nightly patrol that whoever planned the mission had been too careless to look into. Blake dodged behind the server tower, ducking around the aisle and into the next one to avoid being seen. The guard might not have noticed anything was wrong at all if Jarvin and another member of the TAC team hadn't burst into the room, guns blazing. I leaned forward toward the screen, marveling at how sharp the footage was, how we could see the two agents take cover, the careful way Jarvin moved his gun from the security guard to Blake's exposed back, the burst of light as he aimed at the kid and fired. Jude spun away, pressing his face to his hands to avoid seeing. Shit, I thought. Shit, shit, shit. Nico had clearly watched it before we arrived, but he pressed play again and again and again until I had to be the one to click out of the window. He said nothing. There was no expression on his face at all. His eyelids were hooded, and I could almost feel the way he was slipping back, away into the place that was his alone. I can't, Jude cut in, his voice rising with every word, his palm pressed flat against his compass. It's just 3 guys. They're the bad ones. The thought people here care about us. And once they find out what happened, they'll punish them. They'll stand up for us. This isn't the League. This isn't. Do not, I said, tell anyone about this. Do you hear me? No one. But, Rue, Jude looked horrified. We can't just let him get away with this. We have to tell Kate or Albin or someone. They can fix this. Kate won't be able to do anything if we're already dead. I said, I mean it, not a single damn word. And you never go anywhere alone. You stay with me or Vita or Nico or Kate. Promise me that. If you see one of them coming, you have to turn back and head the other way. Promise. Jude was still shaking his head, his fingers fussing with his compass. I tried to think of something comforting to say to him, and it was so strange how torn I felt between wanting to protect them from the truth of what the League really was and the kind of vicious cruelty it took to be an active agent, and the small satisfaction that came from knowing that I had been right about them all along. This was not a safe place. Maybe it had once been for kids like us, but now the foundations were cracking, and a misstep could bring all of HQ crumbling down on top of us. Rob and Jarvin weren't patient souls. They always finished their ops on schedule. This would be no different. I was sure of it. Kate and a few other agents might be sympathetic towards us kids, but for how long? If we became liabilities, if it looked like we were nothing more than messes to be cleaned up, would they stand with us? Again and again, my mind kept turning back to the grenade, the way it had exploded directly under our feet, the way Rob had ordered us to stand exactly there. I had the power to fix this. I knew I did. It was just a matter of getting close enough to Rob and all of his friends to do it. And unfortunately, that was going to be the hardest part. Not a word, I said, turning to go. I'll take care of this. And I would. I was leader. Any thought I had been entertaining about escaping once I had word on Liam and the others fled like a dream in the morning. Jude was alive, and Nico was alive, and I was alive, and for now, I needed to focus every ounce of my energy on keeping it that way. Chapter 5. Instead of heading back to the atrium, I hit the stairs and went up a level, following the second floor's curve to the locker room to shower and change. HQ was cold and dingy as always, but every inch of me felt sticky and hot, like I was on the edge of a fever. A few minutes under freezing cold water would help me clear my head. I could use the rare quiet to try to pull my mind some kind of plan to make sure one of us was with Jude at all times. The lights were already on when I stepped inside. They had automatic motion sensors, meaning someone had either just come in or just left. I stayed completely still, my back flush against the door, listening to the steady drip of a faucet somewhere across the room. No one was in the showers. All of the yellow curtains had been thrown open, and I didn't hear a squeak of faucets or the usual explosion of pressurized water. What I did hear was quiet, almost undetectable under the drip, a steady tapping, like a boot against cement, and a rustling, like a page turning. I took the long way around the lockers, crossing one foot over the other as I ducked around the corner and stepped into the long row of gleaming silver metal. Cole didn't look up from where he was sitting on the bench, a folder in his hands. I caught a glimpse of the familiar sketch of Thurman's electric fence as he turned the page. Was Caledonia a lot like this, do you think? Every muscle in my back tensed, forcing me to stand up straight when the sight of him was enough to make me want to sink into the ground. I flexed my hands into fists at my side and took a deep breath. No, I said. Caledonia was much smaller. They remodeled an old elementary school, but some of the details are the same. He nodded absently. Thurmond, man, he said, dropping a finger on it. I saw some rudimentary sketches of it a few years back, but nothing this detailed. The agents we had there didn't get to see half this stuff. Not even Connor. I stayed exactly where I was, by the lockers, waiting for him to leave. Albin passed these handy copies out at our senior staff meeting tonight, Cole said. Kate got up to excuse herself halfway through. Any idea why? I said nothing. In truth, I did have an idea. Kate had been trying to drive me off this track for months. I had to slip the folder to Albin when she wasn't around. And here I thought you were a mind reader, he said with a faint laugh. Cole's muscles were still stiff, and it was obvious he was in a great deal of pain as he stood. He tilted his head toward the showers. I followed him into one of the shower stalls. The curtain ring screamed as he pulled the cheap plastic shut behind us, making me jump and press my back against the cement wall. It was tight quarters, and I was already feeling uncomfortable when he leaned around me, bruised face a few inches from mine, to turn the shower on at full blast. What are you doing? I demanded, trying to push my way past him. He grabbed my shoulder and held me next to him under the strain. We were drenched before Cole began to speak. The showers are the only place in HQ that aren't recorded. I don't want to take a chance that the other cameras in the room can't pick up our little chat. I have absolutely nothing to say to you, I said, pulling myself free. And yet, I have so much to say to you. Cole put both hands out to block me and nearly lost his balance, unsteady on his feet, not performing up to maximum strength, tired, an easy target. I ran my shoulder into him, but I must have telegraphed my plan. He caught one of my arms and twisted until my muscles screamed and my joints felt like they would pop. His skin was hot, like he was trying to spread the fire burning in his blood to mine. He's one of them. He's one of them. He's one of them. Calm down, he barked, giving me a hard shake. Get a grip. I'm not going to hurt you. I want to talk about Liam. Cole released his iron grip on my arm, then took a step back, holding up his hands. I was still breathing hard as I turned. The water served as a nice barrier that neither of us was willing to cross. Steam curled up around my soaked sneakers, then my knees, and then I was breathing in hot, damp air into my tight chest. Liam who? I said when I got a grip on myself. Cole gave me an exasperated look, and I knew the game was up. You brought him back in, I said, an edge on my voice. I did everything to make sure he'd be safe. Safe? Cole laughed without a hint of humor. You think sending that idiot back out into the world to be captured or killed was kindness? He's lucky I still checked for our contact procedure, otherwise the skip tracer on his ass would have happily delivered him to camp. I couldn't help it, my fists clenched. How did you force him to help you? Why do you assume I forced him to do anything, darling? Don't, I gritted out. Don't call me that. Cole's light brows rose. I guess that answers my question about why you lied to Albin. Care to explain how you even know my brother? Now it was my turn to be surprised. Kate didn't tell you? I have my suspicions, but there wasn't any mention of him in your file. Cole cocked his head to the side, a gesture that Liam was to a T. The second and third fingers on his left hand tapped against his leg. A nervous tick, maybe. Albin seems to have some idea, but the others don't. He leaned out of the stream, resting against the wall for support, still suffering, but coasting on a wave of pride that kept him from showing it. Classic Stewart move. Look, he wasn't working with me at all. That night, the one you saw, was the first time I'd seen him since he split from the league years ago. We set up a contact procedure for emergencies, and he used it. I thought it was a life or death situation, otherwise, I never would have told him how to find me. Because you were on a deep cover op? I asked. What the hell is on that flash drive? I've never seen Alvin so worked up. Cole kept his steady gaze on my face. I think because I was so furious, I was finally able to match it. Tell me. He blew out a long sigh, rubbing the top of his head with bandaged fingers. They'd broken every single one of his left hand to try to get information out of him. Albin had told me as much with no small amount of satisfaction. I'm guessing your op, whatever it was, ended up being compromised, and that's why you stormed your apartment? Cole looked insulted at the suggestion. Hell no, my cover was impeccable. I could have stayed there forever and they wouldn't have suspected a damn thing. I only got hauled in because a skip tracer trailing Lee saw him go into my apartment and called me in for aiding a fugitive PSI kid. None of this would have happened if he hadn't showed up. I was 3 hours away from being extracted. Fine, but you still haven't told me what the hell you were doing in Philadelphia. I want to know what on earth was on that flash drive and why you couldn't find it at the end. That's what you were looking for, right? Yeah, I said finally. That's what I was looking for. The dumbass took it without even realizing it. I balked at that. What? I was deep cover at Lita Corps working as a lab tech on their PSI research that Gray commissioned. You heard about that program, right? He waited until I nodded before continuing. My original objective was just to keep an eye on how things were going. Albin wanted to know what kinds of tests they were running and if they had figured anything out. But I was also supposed to report back if I thought it was possible to extract any kids from the program. You did, I said, making the link so suddenly it surprised even me. That was the testing program he was in. Cole hunched his shoulders against the stream of water. He was the only subject that was strong enough to be taken out. The others were just. I can't describe it to you without it sounding like a horror show. How did you get him out? Simulated cardiac arrest and death, he said. The disposal service the lab used was called, but the League picked him up first. My brain was firing at a rapid pace, drumming up one horrible possibility after another. So the intel on that flash drive, it was the research that you stole? Yeah, something like that. Something like that, I repeated in disbelief. I don't even get to know what's on the stupid thing? He hesitated long enough that I was sure he wouldn't actually tell me. Think about it. What's the one thing every parent of a dead kid wants to know? The one thing scientists have been after for years. The cause of the PSI disease. Are you? No, he wasn't kidding. Not about this. I can't give you details. I didn't have time to look through the research before I downloaded everything. But I heard the talk in the lab the afternoon when they concluded their experiments. They had proof the government was responsible for all of this. Cole clenched his hands into tight fists. Though the fact that they shuttered the lab and permanently silenced all of the scientists the day after I got picked up by the PSFs should be proof enough for most. Did you tell Albin? I asked. No wonder he was so desperate. Not until I got back and I had to think up of some excuse why my cover was blown. I told him I downloaded it, but it set off some silent security system. I'm sure my pride will recover from that in about 1,000 years, Cole sighed. I was afraid if I told him what I had, the agents here would already figured out how to use it before I even got back with it. Cole's fingers tapped at his side. I couldn't tell him before and risk the news getting ahead of me. As disconnected from HQ as I was, I saw things were changing here. People I knew and trusted were being shuffled out to other bases, and people I didn't like all of a sudden had Albin's ear. It was enough to make a guy a little uncomfortable, you know? I nodded. I knew if I had something real to offer Alvin, Cole continued, there'd be a good chance we could outmaneuver the agents trying to change the League. But if word got around here what it was, they'd be able to start planning ways to use it. That intel is the currency we need to buy this joint back from bad seeds, to convince Albin to stick with us. It's the only way to outgun them at the staff table when their plan starts looking like the only real option we have. Random bursts of Rob and Albin's arguments were blasting in my ear. Big statement. Children. Camps. If this intel is so important, how did you get it out of Lita in the first place? Sewed the damn flash drive into the lining of my jacket. I walked right out of the building with it. Because I was on the security team and my buddies there didn't feel a need to frisk me, I knew someone would be alerted I downloaded the files, but I used one of the scientist's network IDs, he said. Easiest damn thing I'd ever done. By the time they figured out she was innocent, I was going to be long gone, until my precious little brother saw the PSFs coming toward my apartment while I was out getting his food. He bailed and grabbed my jacket instead of his by mistake. If Cole hadn't looked so angry about it, I'm not sure I would have believed him. It was torn between laughing and beating his head into concrete wall behind us. How could you have been so stupid? I asked. How could you make such a dumb mistake? You've put his life in danger. The important thing is that we can still get the intel back. The most important, I was almost too outraged to string a sentence together. Liam's life is more important than that stupid flash drive. My, a feral grin spread across Cole's face. Little brother must be a good kisser. The rage flared up in me so fast, so strong, that I actually forgot to slap him. Go to hell, I said, and tried to charge past him. Cole caught me again and pushed me back, chuckling. My hand twitched at my side. Let's see who'd be laughing when I fried every single thought out of his brain. The same idea must have crossed his mind because Cole released me and took a step back. How have you at least been able to establish contact with him since you got back? I asked. He dropped off the radar, Cole said, crossing his arms over his wide chest. The fingers on his left hand tapped against his right arm. Funny thing about him not realizing the payload he's carrying. I can't predict where he might take it or try going. It means it's next to impossible to track that little jerkass, other than to assume he's still out there trying to find our mom and stepdad. Chaos theory at its finest. Why are you telling me this? Because you're the only one who can do something about it. The steam overtook his shape as he disappeared into it. No, listen to me. I've been made. The League won't let me out of HQ. I won't even be able to run ops, never mind search the eastern seaboard for a fugitive. Once they realize our little fictional informant isn't real, they're going to start going through the other options. They're going to ask themselves, who's the only person these two strangers both know? They're going to ask, who would this girl do anything to protect? I bristled, crossing my arms. Cole's eyes flicked down from my face to where my shirt clung to my chest, and I raised my arms that much higher. He let out a thoughtful hum, an absent-minded smile stealing back over his face. I have to say, you're not really his type. Mine, on the other hand. You know what I think? I said, taking a step closer. Not really, darlin', but I have a feeling I'm going to hear it anyway. You're actually a lot more worried about Liam than you are about this intel. You want me to find him to make sure he's okay. That's the real reason you're asking me instead of someone else. Cole scoffed. His shirt had wilted against his skin with the steam, and it was impossible not to look at the strong lines on his shoulders as he set them. Sure, fine. Run with that theory. But can you stop thinking about my brother's dreamy eyes for 2 damn seconds and put your head on straight? This isn't about him or me. It's a matter of making sure that we control the intel so we can bring it to Albin and shut the door on Meadows and all his little buddies. You have no idea what kind of shit they want to organize to start pulling. What they'd do to you kids if they got their way, and they will if we don't figure out a way to outplay them. You think we can keep this up without making a big statement? Rob's words echoed back to me. What are they planning? Something to do with us in the camps? The water spluttered between us. The timer they'd installed to limit the use of hot water clicked off. The water was still flowing, but it was cooling to its usual frigid temperature, and neither of us moved. His big idea, Cole began, his voice brittle, is to use some of the non-essential kids here and the information you provided about the camps. You know, the ones too young to be activated, some of the greens? To do what? I demanded. You said in your report that they don't search or pat down kids who are supposedly pre-sorted as green, right? He waited until I nodded before continuing. That was backed up by one of the other kids we pulled from a smaller camp. Meadows thinks that their intake security procedures have become lax over the years. Since there are so few kids left outside of the camps, they're usually only bringing in a few at a time. That and the PSFs are stressed too thin at the bigger camps. That's true, I said. I'd noticed the number of soldiers decrease over the years at Thurmond as the camp reached maximum capacity and they closed it off to new arrivals. But decreasing the bodies present only translated to them increasing the weapons present and the willingness to hit us with white noise any time anyone so much as looked on the verge of acting out. He thinks, Cole cleared his throat, pressing his good hand against it. Meadows wants to strap explosives to the kids, turn them over to the PSFs, then set the bombs off as they're being driven into camp.
He thinks it'll stir enough fear and discontent among the PSFs to get them to ditch their required service. I didn't hear the last part, not fully. There was a static in my ears that burned and burned and burned away at every thought, every sound, everything outside of my racing thoughts. If you think you're going to faint, sit your ass down, Cole ordered. I told you this because you're a big girl and I need your help. I know you didn't mean for this to happen, but you're in it, knee deep. You're as responsible for writing this as the rest of us. I didn't sit, but the dark blotches in my vision were growing, expanding, swallowing his face. The other agents, they want to do this? Not everyone, he said, but enough that if Albin weren't here, it wouldn't even be a question. Read between the lines there. Oh my God. Kate knows about this, but she's still with him. Why would she stay with someone who could even think about something like that? Connor is a smart woman. If she's with him, it's for a reason, and probably not the one you think. We've both seen how Metals handles things. Then you know that Jarvin handled Blake? I asked. The kid he shot in the back of the op last night? You know that for sure? He demanded. You have some kind of proof? Security camera footage, I said. It was downloaded before anyone could wipe it remotely from here. Keep it to yourself for now. When you bring the intel back, we'll take that to Albin too. Nail Meadows and the others into their coffins. I haven't agreed to anything yet. You're killing me, kid, he said, rolling his eyes again. You'll go and find Liam. You'll bring the intel back. There's never been any doubt in my mind about it, because Jim, Cole said, smiling when I rolled my eyes at the new nickname. I know that you don't want Albin to figure out what really happened and that Liam's involved, and I know you don't want to give him any reason to invest in Meadows' plan. And I'll make sure Albin does turn his attention to freeing the camps, the right way, the one you suggest in your report. That's what you've been after all this time, right? The reason you put together the whole packet of info for him? I know it wasn't going to give Meadows a way to turn it against you. You can find him. Want was overpowering the cooler, quieter, rational part of my brain. You can see him again. You can make sure he gets home this time, and you can help all those kids. All of them. I won't be reprimanded when I get back for taking this little joyride, and you have to swear on the terms, because if you go back on your word, I will tear every thought out of your head until you're nothing but a drooling puddle of snot. Got it? Atta girl, Cole said. That's my Jim. I'll see if I can't get you on the next op back east. You'll have to get creative in how you ditch the minder they send you with. But I think you're up for the challenge. The address is 1222 West Bucket Road, Wilmington, North Carolina. Can you remember that? Start there. Lee's a creature of habit. He'll try heading home to see if our stepdad left a clue about where they're headed. I took a deep breath. My body was completely still, but everything inside me seemed to be galloping. My heart, my thoughts, my nerves. You can do this, Cole said quietly. I know you can. I'll have your back the whole way. I don't need your protection, I said, but Jude does. The beanpole? Sure, I'll keep an eye on him. And Vita and Nico. Your wish is my command. Cole gave a little bow as he backed out of the curtain. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the familiar tilt of his smile and the way it made my chest feel like it would explode. Pleasure doing business with you. Hey, I said suddenly. If anyone might know, it would be another deep cover agent. Have you heard of an op they're calling Snowfall? An agent called Professor? I think I've heard of Snowfall, but only that it was a project they were running in Georgia. Why? Want me to look into it for you? I shrugged. If you have time. I have all the time in the world for you, Jim. Trust me on that. I was still standing there when the locker door slammed shut and the last of the water drained at my feet. 2 long, torturous weeks passed before I found the red folder in my locker. I felt each day tick by, went through the carefully structured routine of training, food, bed. I kept my head down, but my thoughts moving. I was too afraid to look anyone in the face on the off chance that he or she would see the guilt or what I was planning. I almost cried, half in relief, half in panic, when I saw the op folder balanced on my small stack of books. The locker room was roaring with speculation around me, one voice bleeding into another. Someone had been brave or stupid enough during our lesson for the day to ask Instructor Johnson, what they had done with Blake's body and whether we'd have any kind of service for him. Nico had gone green around the gills, but Johnson had only waved the question off.
Team Two's leader, a blue named Erica, was loudly airing her opinion that he was still down in the infirmary being studied. But another, a green named Jillian, insisted she had seen them take the body bag out through the tube a few days ago. They obviously buried him, she was saying. I stood by my locker, reading the folder behind the cover of the door. I could only hear Vida a few feet away, laughing loudly at something another blue had suggested, when I turned. I craned my neck around, trying to look at her locker. Good. Nothing, but the messy heap of shirts she had shoved in there. She would be here. I could tell Jude and Nico to stay close with her. No one would try anything with her, not even Jarvin. There was too much sting in that honeybee. I opened the folder again, letting my eyes skim through each line. Please be East Coast, I thought. Please be back east. I could get to North Carolina so much easier from Connecticut than I could from Texas or Northern California. Op ID 34922A. TOD 15 December 1300. Location Boston, Massachusetts. Massachusetts. I could work with that. Some of the training lines were still running. Objective: pull Dr. P.T. Fishburne, Director of Administration Department of Genetics and Complex Diseases, Harvard School of Public Health. Disable lab. I felt my stomach clench. Pull, meaning I would interrogate him there in Boston at the League safe house. If he provided to be uncooperative, we would bring him back to the nearest base. My job: disable, meaning fry, destroy, demolish. The tactical team's job: TAC team, beta group. PSI, Tangerine, Sunshine. Minder, TBD. Oh, I whispered, leaving my hands completely. Hell no. I left the folder in my locker and slammed it shut, twisting my wet hair back into a loose bun. I was out before anyone could notice I was gone. It was there in the afternoon. If Kate wasn't in a meeting, she would be in her room, most likely, or in the atrium. A drip of water fell from my hair onto my cheek, and I swiped angrily at it, plowing through the hanging strips of plastic that were, in theory, supposed to help insulate what little warmth we had at HQ. I glanced up at the low ceilings to avoid making eye contact with yet another cluster of agents, stepping off to the side to allow them to pass. The hair on the back of my neck rose with each step that echoed behind me, keeping pace with my own. There was someone behind me. There had been since I stepped out of the locker room. The heavy steps and the throaty gulps of air made me think it was a man. I glanced up as I passed one of the steel beams overhead. Whoever was following me was doing it at the exact same pace. I couldn't see his reflection, but I could feel him behind me, feel every ounce of his disgust for me cutting through the hallway's damp chill, gripping the column of my spine. Don't look, I said, clenching my jaw. Just keep going. It was nothing. My mind was playing tricks, like it loved to do. It's nothing. It's no one. But I could feel him hovering behind me, like his fingers were trying to smooth down the goosebumps on my skin. There was no stopping the sudden upswing of my heartbeat. I knew what I was going to do, and that I had enough training to fight someone off. But all I could think was about Blake Howard's shoes dangling off his pale, stiff toes in the infirmary. I found the double doors I'd been looking for and burst into the atrium, half out of breath. They were in the middle of setting the round tables and folding chairs again, returning the space to its usual as a rec room. Here and there I saw agents dressed in their finest league sweats, doling out playing cards, watching the news on TV, or even playing with a mismatched chess set. Kate came in through the opposite set of doors, cutting a sharp image in her usually polished navy skirt suit. Her blonde hair was twisted back into a tight bun. She absently bumped into an agent sitting at the nearby table, murmuring a faint apology. I didn't realize she was looking for someone until her eyes landed on my face. There you are, she said, jogging over to me the best she could in heels. I opened my mouth, but she held up a hand to quiet me. I know, I'm sorry. I did everything I could to change Alvin's mind, but he insisted. He's not 16 yet, I said. He isn't ready. You know that. We all do. Are you trying to turn him into the next Blake Howard? I might as well have socked her in the face. Kate reared back, a look of horror filtering through her usual mask of calm. I fought to get him off this, Ruby. I assigned Vita to go with you, but someone convinced Albin that Jude should be activated early. They need a yellow for the security system, and Albin said it wasn't going to make sense to bring two different teams on a simple op. We were attracting a few stray glances. Kate took my arm and steered me over to an empty table, forcing me to sit down. You have to try harder, I insisted. Our little sunshine didn't perform well in high pressure situations, and he had the tendency to wander off to explore shiny things when he needed to be conducting surveillance. The only thing he knew about using a firearm was that the end of the hole needed to be pointed away from his face. He'll be 15 in a few weeks. Kate kept one hand on mine. I'm sure it'll be fine. This is good, straightforward op to let him dip his toes in the water. I could do it by myself if this involves sabotaging some kind of electrical equipment. My hands are tied, Ruby. I can't keep pushing back against Albin, or he'll start seeing me as a problem, and she took a deep breath, absently smoothing first her hair, then her skirt. Her voice sounded stronger when she spoke again, but she wasn't looking at me now. The only comfort I have in all of this is knowing that he'll be with you and you'll look after him. Can you do that? Her skin was hollow beneath her high cheekbones, like she had just recovered from a long illness. I leaned forward, noticing now the way her makeup had collected in the new fine lines around her eyes. How dark circles were that rim how the dark circles were that rimmed her eyes. She was only 28 and was already starting to look older than my mother had when I left her. Sometimes it felt like this was where I found the real Kate, in the pauses. I wouldn't describe our relationship as good, because it was built on a lie, and a pretty cruel one at that. She could say one thing and mean something else entirely, but right then, surrendered to the quiet, her face told me everything. I saw the struggle in the lines of her face and knew whatever words came next were more for the agents around us than they were for me. I have to go up north, she said in an even voice, for an assignment. Up north, meaning the surface streets of Los Angeles, meaning it probably had something to do with the federal coalition. Kate was a senior agent now. She'd earned her wings. If they were sending her up there, it was to do something important for Albin. So you won't be coming with us? I asked. Kate glanced behind me and waved at whoever she saw standing there. I felt something cold drip down the back of my neck, though my hair was nearly dry. There you are, Kate said. I was just about to tell Ruby that she'll be in good hands on the op. Keep a careful eye on my girl, won't you? Rob had never, not since the first day I met him, willingly touched me. He, like the others, knew better. Still, I watched his hands where they hung at his sides, dark hair curling on the backs of his knuckles. My throat tightened. Don't I always? Rob said with a faint chuckle. Kate stood, her moon-pale face glowing in artificial light. See you later, Gator. It was her stupid childish send-off, the same one she always gave us when she left. The others wouldn't have hesitated to finish her little rhyme. Jude had thought up the little goodbye as a play off her call sign. Now I could barely choke out the words. In an hour, sunflower. Soon as they walked away, I saw Cole sitting on the other end of the room, an open book on the table in front of him. By the dark look on his face, it was more than clear he'd heard the entire conversation. You said you would protect him. Was there really no one in the entire league I could trust? These people couldn't be counted on for anything. All of their promises bled into lies. Cole shook his head, turning his palms face up on the table. It was a weak, silent apology, but at least he understood. Shifting this one single piece on the board was enough to change the whole game. Chapter 6. They smuggled Jude and me into Boston in broad daylight, riding in the jump seats of a fat-bellied cargo plane. It was an older model, the one that we'd used to fly back from Philadelphia, and its smell lent of some possibility to Jude's theory. It had once been used to move dead meat. I watched the enormous crates in front of us, trying to ignore the way they creaked under the strain of the straps holding them in place. All of them were marked with Lita Corporation's elegant golden swan, which felt like some kind of horrible wink from the universe. A rational part of me knew it didn't mean anything, that it wasn't some bad omen. We flew on Lita Corp's planes all the time. They'd realized the benefits of playing nice with both Gray and the Federal Coalition meant they had special privileges to travel to and from California to move their product. As uncooperative as always, Gray had the brilliant idea to try to starve the Federal Coalition out of California by forbidding imports into the state and exports out of it. Unfortunately for the rest of the country, California was where most of the fresh produce was. They had easy access to oil. They were drilling in Alaska. The Federal Coalition was our matchmaker, though. We got to piggyback on flights like this in exchange for serving as their knife in the dark. Albin saw it as a fair trade for the intelligence we'd gathered and countless ops we'd run on their behalf over the years, though I know he wanted more. Specifically, respect, money, and the promise that he'd be given a place in their new government once Gray was out. On the other side of the plastic wrapped heap of crates was Beta Team, laughing at some joke that had been lost to the steady snarl of the engines. I pressed the back of my freezing hands against my eyes, trying to ease the throbbing there. What little heat was still circulating in the cargo space must have been clinging to the ceiling, because I felt exactly none of it. I sank down lower in my seat and wrapped my black puffer coat tightly around my center as I could with the seatbelt in the way. Deep breath in, Jude was chanting, deep breath out. Deep breath in, deep breath out. You are not in an airplane. You are floating through the sky. Deep breath in. I think you actually have to be taking deep breaths for that to work, I told him. The plane dipped, only to bob up a second later. Is that is that normal? It's just a little turbulence, I told him, trying to pull away from his grip. It happens on every flight. Jude had strapped a tag team's member helmet on his head and a pair of goggles over his eyes. I didn't have the heart to tell him that if the plane went down, a head wound would be the least of his worries. God, he couldn't handle the stress of a plane flight. This was a mistake. I should have fought harder, argued, swayed someone to get Jude off this op. Back at HQ, the thought of having to bring him along to search for Liam had been frustrating, an annoying dose of reality to swallow. But now I was just scared. How was he going to handle the pressure of escaping Rob and Beta Team if he couldn't sit still for 5 minutes? If his imagination had already stolen his courage and had him made a run for it? Maybe I can find a way to leave him, with Barton, I thought, rubbing my forehead. The problem was, how do I know that Barton wasn't one of the agents who sidled up with Rob in arguing for attacking the camps? How did I know that any of his teammates wouldn't gladly put a bullet in Jude's skull, neat and easy? This was going to be great. It's going to be so cool. Jude's op folder was stained with specks of whatever he'd eaten for dinner the night before, and he was looking a little soft around the edges. I wanted to scream. Scream. It was another mouth to feed and another back to protect. Jude was the living embodiment of a distraction. But what was the alternative here? Sending him back to that hellhole, hoping he'd still be there alive when I got back and Cole put his plan into action? No. Jude was dead weight, one I was going to have to carry on my shoulders the whole way. But I was stronger now. I could do it. I'd find Liam, and I'd keep both of them safe. Because that was the only option. That was the only one I was willing to accept. Bartlett, what do you think he does? Jude asked. The pages fanned under his fingers. I recognized the other names. Frances is nice. She gave me candy bar once. I like Lebowski and Gold and Philman too. Cool guys. They taught me how to play solitaire. And I like Leader too. I'm glad Barton got promoted. But who the heck is Bartlett? Don't know, don't care, I said, focused on squarely on the medical crates in front of me. Actually, I did know who Bartlett was, some new guy who transferred in from Georgia base operations. I had overheard some of the green girls in the locker room talking about what a fine specimen he was, but they had spotted me and split before I could find out anything useful. Jude was humming now, one foot tapping out a frantic rhythm against the mats underfoot. The compass hanging around his neck had slipped out from under his jacket and was swinging in time with him. I don't think he stopped moving the entire 5 hours we were in the air. Bartlett got his training at West Point. Do you think that means he's good? If you have the personnel files in your folder memorized, why are you asking me? Because people are more than what they say from a piece of paper or a computer file. I really don't care that Bartlett's specialty is knife fighting. I mean, don't get me wrong, holy crap. But I'd rather know why he joined the league, what he thinks about that decision now. Favorite food. At that I turned to look at him, half amazed, half horrified. You think his favorite food is more important than knowing his preferred method of killing you in a fight? Well, yeah, it kind of is. I couldn't stop myself, and I couldn't explain why anger flashed so fast and hot through me. You want to know about Beta Team? I hear my heart hammering in my ears. For the next 12 hours, they are the only 6 people who won't be trying to kill you. But they won't have to protect you, but they don't have to protect you, especially if it interferes with the op. So follow leader's orders and keep your damn head down. That is all you need to know. Geez, Jude said, blinking. Not every adult in the world is trying to bury us. My tongue was trapped behind my clenched teeth. You think killing you is the worst thing they could do to you? I just want to know people, he explained. What's wrong with that? Well, sorry, I said. Most of them don't want to know you. No, I mean, he waved his hands through the air like he was going to unravel the mystery of whatever he was trying to say. It's just that nowadays people are so quick to boil you down to bare bones of info and upload you into a system, you know? And I think no one can ever really know another person unless you really pay attention. He stopped, stretching his long neck out to glance around. But our minder for the op was busy playing a game of cards with Francis. Like, look at Rob. His file is perfect. He went to Harvard, was an Army Ranger, then an FBI agent for a while. He's 6 feet tall, weighs exactly 203 pounds. He knows how to use firearms and speaks decent Spanish, but that, nowhere in there, that hints at the fact that Jude trailed off. I don't want to just see someone's face. I want to know his shadow, too. I don't think Jude has ever lost anyone before Blake. He had heard about agents killed on his mission, or on that raid, or in that explosion. But once you fully settle into the special brand of pain that comes with being separated from someone you know, down to the marrow of his bones, you learn not to try. Yeah? I asked. And do you know my shadow? Jude looked away, down to where the heels of his comically large boots were bouncing against the mat. No, he said, so quiet it was almost lost to the thousands of miles of crystal blue air beneath us. Sometimes I don't think I've ever even seen your face. It doesn't bother me. Feeling left my hands, but it was only because of the cold, not the ice that had somehow manifested between us in the span of a few seconds. My jaw only clenched to keep my teeth from chattering, not to bite back an ugly, frustrated noise. I don't need to be liked, or wanted, or cared for. I don't need friends. And I certainly didn't need the kid who once brought down the league's entire computer network tripping over his own huge feet, trying to guilt me into being something I wasn't. I was fine, just a little cold. I burrowed down just a little further into my coat, watching him fidget out of the corner of my eye. He was wringing his hands red. Beta team is a good group, I said finally. They'll treat you right as long as you follow their orders. Alpha doesn't give a damn, so try to make sure you paired with another kid who can watch your back. Delta's run by Farbringer, and he likes kids. Yeah, Jude said, but the life had gone out of his voice. He was studying the stretch of black fabric clinging to his knees. Ruby, he said so softly I almost didn't hear him over the roar of the plane. Did Rob pick me for this op so he could kill me? I met Rob for the first time right after Kate had gotten me out of Thurmond. The two League agents had planned to rendezvous at an abandoned gas station, both bringing with them any kids they'd managed to free. He claimed he couldn't get his batch of kids out and had to escape alone to avoid being detected by camp controllers. Kate, who was so tangled up in him, had believed it instantly. But one slip, one careless touch, and his mind had opened to mine. I had seen the truth of it. On the nights I didn't stay awake, terrorized by the thoughts of what would happen to Liam and Chubbs and Sue and the other girls I had left behind at Thurmond, Rob's memories came slithering in. I would see the hooded boy on the ground, his entire body convulsing as the agent shot him at point-blank range. I saw the girl's face, and her lips move to beg for mercy, and the way the dumpster had rattled when Rob had thrown her body into it. And by the end, I would wake up feeling sick, not just for the loss of life, but because it had felt like I had killed them myself, talking about knowing someone's shadow. Try being his shadow. I can't stop thinking about Blake. I think about him every day, all the time. We should have told someone, he said. Jarvin and the others would be kicked out. The League would go back to the way it was before all this happened. They're the bad ones. If you get rid of them, that wasn't always how infections worked. Sometimes the rot spread too far to be removed with one single cut. Rob and Jarvin and the others might only be a few of many. I was so tempted to tell him the truth. Then everything Cole had told me, but panicking him just to make a point was by far the stupidest course. If this was going to work, he couldn't know what the plan was in advance. I couldn't give him any chance to slip up and give us away to Rob and the others. You'll be fine, I told him. I'll be there the entire time. He was shaking. I don't think he heard a single word that left my mouth. How could they do this? What did we ever do to hurt them? Why would they hate us so much? I closed my eyes at the sound of Rob's booming laugh cutting through the air. Why don't you try to sleep? I said. We're going to be flying for a few more hours, and there's no reason we both have to be tired. Okay, he said. I just wish. You wish what? I asked. Can we keep talking instead? He confessed it to his knees, awkwardly drawing his feet into the seat. You can't really stand sitting in silence, can you? I asked. It actually kills you a little bit, doesn't it? It was a long time before he replied, as if he were trying to prove me wrong. No, he said. It's just that I don't like the quiet. I don't like things I hear there. Don't ask, don't ask, don't ask. Like what? I hear them fighting mostly, he whispered. I hear them screaming at her in the way she used to cry. But I hear it through closed doors. My mom, she used to put me in her closet, because her temper was better when I was out of sight. I don't remember what she sounded like normally, just the way she sounded then. I nodded. That happens to me sometimes. Isn't that so weird? It's been like 8 years and I hear them, and I think of how dark and tight it was, and it feels like I can't breathe. I hear them all the time, like they're chasing me and I can't escape them. Not ever. They won't let me go. I knew he was exhausted, and I knew firsthand what exhaustion did to your mind, the tricks it played on you. Just as your defenses were dropping one by one, ghosts don't haunt people. Their memories do. Will you talk until I fall asleep? Just until I fall asleep. And can you maybe never tell anyone about it, like ever? Sure. I leaned my head back against the seat and wondered what on earth I could say to calm him down. There's this story I used to really like as a kid, I began quietly, just loud enough that he could hear it over the roar of the plane's engines. About these rabbits. Maybe you've heard it before. I started at the beginning, the escape. Fleeing through the forest, meeting a new danger at every turn, the desperation that came from trying to protect everyone when you could barely take care of yourself. The boy with the bottomless dark eyes, the betrayal, the fire, the smoke. And by the time I realized I had told him my own story, Jude was fast asleep, tucked firmly into dreams. Here's the thing about places like Boston. No matter where they were before, no matter the look of the population, no matter what businesses had flourished, no matter what great person was born there, the city that people knew was gone. It was loved. It was the loved one you saw in the rearview mirror, growing smaller and smaller the more time and distance you put between you, even its shape becomes unrecognizable. Red brick buildings remained firmly rooted in the ground, but their windows had been bashed in. The grass on the common was dead in patches, overgrown in others and scorched to ruin where there had once been trees. Grand townhomes were locked and shuttered, ice and old snow clinging to their dark stones. There was a crowded lane open for each road for cars and bikes to inch their way towards down. But many of the old, overlapping streets were filled with makeshift tents, and the people huddled inside them. It was bizarre to see the bright, colorful bursts of the old umbrellas and children's bedsheets propped up as makeshift shelters. Some of the worst off folks were exposed to the freezing air with nothing more than a sleeping bag or a wall to lean against. I don't get it, Jude said, staring through the tinted windows. None of the streetlights were on. There were enough fires burning that we could see the scene, and the first flurries of snow. From the back of the ambulance, a hospital had oh so helpfully exchanged for the Lita supplies we had dropped off. A lot of people lost their homes and housing when the markets crashed, I said, trying to be patient with him. The government couldn't pay off its debts, and because of it, those people lost their jobs and couldn't afford to keep what they owned. But if everyone everywhere is like this, why didn't the banks just let everyone stay where they were until things got better? Isn't there something we should do to help? Because that's not the way the world works, Rob called out from the driver's seat. Get used to it. He was wearing a dark blue EMT uniform, and he seemed to relish the ability to flash the lights and sirens when people in the streets didn't move out of his way fast enough. Sitting up front with him was one of the members of the beta team who had been assigned to serve as support on behalf of our op. His name was Reynolds, and I only had to take one look at Jude's face as Reynolds and Rob slapped each other's backs to know he had been one of the agents Jude had overheard plotting against us. The rest of Beta Team were 3 blocks ahead of us, all 7 crammed into the back of an old pickup truck. They were dressed as protesters of some kind, street clothes, ragged hair, Red Sox caps, jackets thick enough to hide weapons tucked underneath. This professor we were looking for lived in Cambridge, just over the Charles River. Harvard's medical school, where he was conducting his research, was happily situated in the middle of the Boston proper. Rob had decided that his questionable wisdom to divide the op into two-pronged simultaneous assault. Beta team would handle disabling the lab, and Jude and I would break into the target's house and pull him in for questioning. At least that's what Rob thought. We backtracked to the Longfellow Bridge, crossing the river to the sound of Jude's eager questions about baseball, the river, what the sticky substance was on the floor of the ambulance, how we were going to get home, until Barton finally buzzed the intercoms in our ears. This is leader in position. Ready commence op at 22:30. What is your status, Minder? 5 minutes out from the goose's nest, Rob answered, and I felt the ambulance accelerate under me. My anxiety took that exact moment to wake up, and I sat a little straighter, bringing my knees to my chest and wrapping my arms around them. Are we connected to Homefront? Homefront here, line is secure, tracking both units now. Okay to proceed at 22:30. Satellite feeds show minimum interference at target 2. Minder, we're showing considerable activity in your sector. I'm not sure who was more disgusted to hear him referred to as Minder, Rob or me. He didn't have a team of kids here like Kate, but anyone who supervised a freak kid on an op was slapped with that title. There's a protest in the old man's yard, Rob said. I looked up, scrambling on all fours to get to the back window. He was right. We were passing by the university's tree-lined park with its crisscrossing paths, hundreds, maybe even thousands of bodies clustered around the large bonfire, ignoring the sleet falling around them. Signs and drums littered the nearby patches of snow, the only thing between the protesters and the small ring of disgruntled police officers that had surrounded them. People seemed to be hovering at the edge of the small park, as if looking for a way to break through the line of uniforms and guns. What are they protesting? Jude whispered, his breath fogging up the glass. I didn't answer, just motioned for him to get down. I began counting the blocks as we passed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The ambulance came to a shuddering stop a short distance away from the professor's pleasant little white house with a slanted gray slate roof. Rob unhooked his seatbelt and stood, stretching slightly as he climbed into the back. We're in position, he said, pressing a hand over to his ear. I felt his eyes slide over to me, but I kept mine kept fixed firmly on Jude, who had started shaking again. This kid is going to get himself killed, I thought, pinching the bridge of my nose. You have the all clear, said the agent monitoring the op at HQ. Goose egg is a go. Roger, Barton said, and Rob echoed him. He was looking a little ragged, a dark beard coming in along the edge of his square jaw, but Rob's eyes were alert. He tossed the boy the other EMT jacket and a cap, like that could hide the fact that Jude looked about 2 years younger than he actually was. Don't say a word. Don't fidget, and follow my lead exactly, then get your ass back here, he told the boy. Then, turning to me, he added, You know what to do? I met his dark eyes straight on. I do. Rob needed Jude to disable the house's alarm system and man the gurney to get the professor out on the chance that any neighbors got nosy and opened their curtains at the wrong moment. We were supposed to take him around the city in a long 15-minute lap so I could work him into a state of cooperation, then dump him back on the sidewalk, his memory erased of the encounter. If he proved to be too hard to crack, Rob had a safe house we could bring him to for more painful methods of persuasion, I guess. Rob opened the back door, letting in a freezing draft of air. He and Reynolds pulled the gurney down along with the duffel bag. Jude was wringing his hands again. I grabbed his arms just before he jumped down after Rob. Be careful. Jude gave me a little salute and clenched his teeth in a way that made me think he was going to try for a reassuring smile or trying not to puke all over himself. Later, Gator. The door slammed shut behind them. In an hour, Sunflower. In all of the wild daydreams I'd had about the day I'd finally pack it up and leave, none of them had come close to resembling this moment. I didn't expect to feel as calm as I did. The first time I had escaped from Kate and Rob, the fear had flamed up and fast and true. Moving my feet before my brain could catch up, I hadn't known where I was going or how I was going to get there. I had to just run. It was only dumb luck that I had found Zoo and the others. I couldn't rely on luck this time. I didn't have to feel afraid of what would happen if I were caught. The steady composure I felt made me feel so much stronger than any than any of the wild, raw emotions I had surrendered to in the gas station. I had something to accomplish and people to protect, and no one, especially not Rob Meadows, was going to keep me from it so long as there was a breath in my body. The porch light flipped on as the three of them passed under it. Jude threw one quick glance back over his shoulder at me, then disappeared around the side of the porch, the little power box that controlled the house's electricity. When the porch light switched off, Rob bent over the gold door lock. I shrugged out of the League's heavy black coat, pulling out a lighter and a Swiss Army knife I had stashed in one of my pockets and tucking them in my boots. Liam's old leather jacket wouldn't keep the cold out for long, but it didn't have a tracking device in it. I climbed up to the driver's seat and propped the door open. My boots had just landed in the snow when Jude's came around the back of the ambulance. What are you? I bolted forward, clapping a hand over his mouth. His eyes went wide in panic until I pressed a finger to my lips. Jude was too confused to process what was happening. I had to take his wrist and drag him behind me, letting the ambulance bulk block us from view. We're inside, came Rob's rough voice in my ear. Status, leader? On schedule, minder. I glanced up at the street sign, Garfield Street, and tried to get my bearings. I had to put as much distance between Rob and us before he realized we were gone. I could outrun him on foot, but I couldn't outrun a car, especially not with Jude. If we could make it back to the protest, we might be able to lose him and Reynolds in the crowd. Rob would think to look for us in the place we had a decent chance of being caught. He was a brute, and a vicious one at that, but he wasn't very imaginative. Jude panted beside me, looking slightly frazzled but otherwise all right. The wind was knocking around his hat and tugging at mine. I pulled the black knit cap down snug over my ears, trapping my loose, long hair in muffled sounds from both prongs and the op. The cold was nothing I had felt in Virginia. It was sharp, a persistent clawing at every bare inch of skin. I tried picking up my pace in a faster run, blinking back the tears and snow flurries, but Jude was struggling to keep up as it was. Patches of ice snapped underfoot, branches hidden beneath the old snow crushed as I was trampled through the trees separating the houses and buildings. South, south, south. I just needed to keep heading south, and I'd find Harvard Yard and the protesters and escape. Target acquired. Tangerine. Is the perimeter clear? Jude jerked toward me in wild fear, but I shook my head in warning. Rob's voice went down my spine like a match against a matchbook. The fire it lit was small, and it was burning through the tight control I had over my voice. Oh yeah, I said after I pressed a finger to my comm. The coast is all clear. I knew the moment Rob opened the ambulance door, the very second he found us gone, his end of the line went silent, even as HQ and Barton were requesting status updates from him. I could see his face in my mind, white, rapidly turning purple with the effort to hold back his fury. A small smile curved on the corners of my mouth. He couldn't call out for me without revealing that he had lost me in the first place. A minder's job, above anything else, was to mind the freaks under his care. Tan, Reynolds began to say, only to be sharply cut off. Hey, Rob, I said in a low, even voice. I saw the light from the bonfire in the yard, the new orange hue of the sky. Jude caught the back of my jacket, his long fingers twisting in the leather as he struggled to keep up with me. The snow was falling harder now. I pulled the hood of the fleece I was wearing under my jacket over my head, stuffed my hands in my pockets, and crossed the last street. I got a question for you. Rue, Jude whispered. What are you doing? What are we doing? Tangerine? Keep all non-op transmissions off the line, came Barton's voice. Good. I wanted him to hear. I wanted all of them to hear this. The ring of police and National Guardsmen had been busted open, and the protesters gathered. They were streaming past them, signs clutched in their hands, drums beating. A midnight march, I guess. Through I had no idea for what. And judging by the variety of signs I saw, they weren't really sure what they were protesting either. The draft that forced them into the PSF service, President Gray's unwillingness to negotiate with the West Coast government, the general state of the awfulness spreading like poison over the entire country as pollution had over Los Angeles. Most of the faces around us were young, but not teenagers. A good portion of the country's universities and colleges had been temporarily shut down due to lack of funding, but if a few still had money left, I guess Harvard would have been one of them. "We're your tired, your poor, your huddled masses," read the sign next to me. I let them get ahead of us, trailing far enough behind that the others had less of a chance of hearing the chanting over the comm. I waited until they had cleared out of the square before touching the comm again to activate my microphone. "I just want to know, what were their names?" "Tangerine?" Rob's voice was tight, and he sounded slightly breathless. "I have no idea." "Tangerine, Cease." The woman at HQ didn't sound particularly happy with me either. "What the hell is going on, Minder?" Barton was listening too. "Those two kids you took off the two you those two kids you took out of that camp the night we met," I said, keeping my eyes straight ahead on a young guy with dreadlocks waving us all forward. "The boy and the girl. I'm sure you remember them. It must have taken a lot of effort to get them out, never mind to tie their hands and feet that way." Jude stared at me, his dark brows drawn together in confusion. "It doesn't make any sense to me. You got them out, and then you killed them in that alley and left them there. Why? What was the point? What did they say or do to make you so angry? That girl was begging you. She didn't want to die. But you took her out of that camp, and you executed her. You didn't even take the boy's mask off." I clenched my fist to get them to stop shaking, and in that brief second, suddenly it was Alvin's voice crackling in my ear. "What's all this?" He took a deep breath. "I need you both to meet Leader. If you don't return to HQ with Minder—" "We're not coming back to HQ," I said, "until he's gone forever." It's a dangerous play. If Alvin took the bait and booted Rob, there was still a good chance that the others in his bloodthirsty pack would retaliate against the kids at HQ. But now that Alvin knew Rob was hostile, he and the agents we could trust would be on the lookout for more of that attitude, at least for the next few weeks. Jarvin and the other conspirators would feel safe knowing that Jude was away and couldn't rat them out, and I didn't need forever. A few weeks, and I would be back with all we need to force them out. "Rob, listen. I just want to know their names. I want to know if you even bothered to ask before you killed them. Do you think this is a game? Stop lying. God damn it. When I find you—" "You better hope you never find me," I say, ice edging my words. I didn't even have to close my eyes to see that girl's face. I felt her walking beside me, her eyes open, forever fixed on the barrel of the gun and the hand that held it steady. "Because what I'll do to you will be so much worse than a bullet in the skull." I didn't wait to hear the response to that. I yanked the comm out and dropped it, letting the feet behind me smash it and scatter the pieces. I motioned for Jude to follow me as I jogged to catch up to the protesters. We were swept into the flood of people pouring down Massachusetts Avenue's wide berth. I was being jostled from all sides. Arms were being thrust around me, and people were yelling and screaming. And it was the safest I had felt in months. I threw a glance behind me as I surged forward, looking for Jude's pale face, and there he was, eyes wide, cheeks and nose pink from the blistering cold. I was coasting on a wave of simmering power and control. I had gotten us away, and now no one was even looking at us. I felt Jude grab the back of my jacket again and guide us forward, flowing with the crowd. The drum up ahead rattled to life with a frantic rhythm, and for the first time I felt a twinge of panic. I thought I heard someone call my name behind me, but even the chanting was drowned out by the fury gripping my mind. The crowd around me was still growing, and the further away they moved down the street, the more they seemed to work themselves into a frenzy of excitement. The same chant was singing through their blood. More, more, more. That was the only thing they had in common, the only thing they all wanted. More food, more freedom, more money, more. I realized where we were headed almost immediately, back into the heart of Boston. The Massachusetts Avenue Bridge was up ahead, and so were the familiar blue and red flashing lights of the police cars that were blockading it. The protesters didn't stop. There were dozens of policemen in riot gear, National Guardsmen taking aim, and not a single one of the protesters stopped marching forward. I felt my feet slow and was shoved forward by the momentum of the crushing wave behind me. The policeman in the center of all of this, a grizzly old man staring down at the rest of us, held a megaphone. "This is Sergeant Bowers of the Boston Police Department. You are trespassing in violation of Mass General Law, Chapter 266, Section 120, and are subject to arrest. You are unlawfully assembled. I demand you to immediately and peacefully disperse. If you do not immediately and peacefully disperse, you will be arrested. This is your only warning." I didn't see the first stone that was thrown. I didn't even see the second or the third. but I heard the clatter of their impact against the shields of the riot police. Fire then, someone was yelling. Fire, fire, fire. The girls around me picked up their words and began screaming it. Shoot, shoot, shoot was the only rival to the chant. I took a step back, elbowing my way through the crowd's throbbing crush. They wanted the police to open fire on them, to make a point, or to capture it on video. I saw the handheld devices clutched in their stiff, frozen fingers. The snowflakes clung to the camera's glassy eye, following the path of every rock, snowball, and brick that was launched toward the men and women in uniforms. I ducked, holding my arms over my head as I fought my way back to the herd. A stray elbow nailed me in the back of the head, and it was enough to knock me out of my haze. I reached behind me, grabbing Jude's arm as I turned, but the hurt person holding my jacket was a short Asian girl with thick black glasses, who seemed just as startled to see me as I was to see her. Sorry, she shouted. I thought you were my friend. Damn it, I whirled, scanning the nearby crowd. Where is he? The gunshot was the only sharp enough to cut through the chanting, the only thing strong enough to silence them. The girl and I both jumped back, but we were roughly shoved to the side by the people still marching forward behind us. Maybe the officer or the soldier thought the threat of it would break the crowd, but they had seriously misjudged the anger powering these people. The protesters at the head of the pack were clearly used to this kind of bullying. I glanced back over my shoulder. They were struggling against the clear shields, blocking their path, clambering over the hoods of the police cars. The unlucky ones were yanked back and beaten into the ground by batons. Jude, I called, my guilt nearly cutting me down to my knees. Jude. The first can of tear gas released with a sinister hiss, but it wasn't enough to shift the crowd. They only launched themselves towards the officers at a run. I felt someone try to grab my arm and haul me back around to face them, but I yanked myself free. Bad plan, I thought, choking on the poisoned air. Bad, bad, bad plan, Ruby. It was dumb luck I even saw him then. I had started turning the other way, only to catch a glimpse of his curly head of hair out of the corner of my eye. The blue EMT jacket was flapping in the wind, one sleeve torn with a ragged edge. Jude was standing on his toes, one hand on the nearest street light to keep himself upright, the other curled around his mouth as he shouted, Ruby, Rue, over and over again. I say now the way that fear fed anxiety and turned it into chaos. Jude's shape went out of sight, tucked into a cloud of tear gas, hidden behind the sudden stampede of bodies trying to get away from the guns. From the smoke from the bridge, people were screaming and the gunfire hadn't stopped. There were new noises, too. A helicopter hovering above us, casting a light down over us. The whirring of its blades drove some of the smoke away, clearing the way for the National Guardsmen to rush toward us. For the first time, I noticed more than one black uniform in the mix. It had been a clear night. If my eyes weren't streaming with tears, if I could have heard anything other than the thrumming thunder of my own heart, I would have noticed sooner. The air seemed to vibrate against my skin, and I caught the whiff of ozone the second too late to do something about it. Jude, don't! The line of streetlights along the stretch of road began to buzz, their orange lights bleaching to a molten white a second before they blew out altogether, sending a shower of glass and sparks down on an already terrified protesters. I'm not sure anyone recognized what Jude was, not until the lights from the nearby building switched on after months or years of darkness. I reached him half a second before a National Guardsman and his guns did, throwing my shoulder into his chest and driving us both to the ground. The impact blew the air from my lungs, but I scrambled up, shielding him from the butt of the soldier's rifle. With one blow, it cracked against my skull and sent me spinning into darkness. Chapter 8. Every single word that filtered through my mind was of the four-letter variety. What are you doing here? The triumphant smile I expected to see there never made an appearance. Instead, she gave me a once-over and snorted. Wow, your danger instincts are set on high fucking alert, aren't they? And they said it would be hard to find you. I pulled the gun out of my waistband slowly and took careful aim. I let the invisible hands inside my mind unfurl, imagining them launching toward her, driving into all her thoughts. But nothing. Nothing at all. How cute, she said. I have one of those too. For a long beat, neither of us moved. Her dark eyes flickered down at me the same way they did when we sparred in training, sizing me up, wondering if I'd really do it. Neither of us saw him move,
One minute, Jude was cowering behind me, and the next, he sidled up to Vida, one hand on her shoulder. I'm really sorry about this. A tiny arc of blue electricity leaped from the walkie-talkie clipped to her belt, stroking Vita's skin softly, like a snake's exploring tongue. Vita must have realized what he was about to do at the same moment I did, but she couldn't move away fast enough. Her eyes rolled back as she crumbled to the ground. Oh my God, I said, dropping down beside her to feel for the pulse in her neck. I just gave her a little love zap, Jude said, every hair on his head standing on end. She'll she'll come around any minute. But Rue, tell me I did the right thing. I don't want to leave her here. I don't think we should go without her. But she wasn't going to help, and we have to find Liam. She would have told, and he's important. You did the right thing, I said. Jude, thank you. Thank you. What are we going to do now? Jude whispered, following me down the hallway to the empty room marked employees only. A quick look around told me that the TAC team had divided. Half were upstairs, visible in the glass offices above us, and half were headed out onto the train platform. What PSFs weren't sprawled out and still on the floor were bound together in an unwilling huddle of black. We followed the long hallway to its end, narrowly missing a station worker going into the employee break room. I kept my eyes focused on the double doors at the very end of the stretch of concrete, too afraid of what I would see if I tore my gaze away. I opened the right door as quietly as possible, motioning for Jude to follow. It shut with a faint click. It took me 2 precious seconds to figure out we were even looking at the bus terminal, and another 2 to see the old man in a navy uniform come hustling around the corner, a huge wet coffee stain all down his front. Every bone in my body went hollow as I grabbed Jude's arm and hauled him closer. The man came up short of us, his already wide, panicked eyes going just a bit wider as he gave us the once-over. For one long, terrible moment, no one said anything at all. There was only the sound of gunfire from inside the station and the screech of car tires from the parking lot on the other side of the building. I raised a hand out toward him on instinct, but Jude caught it and pushed it down. Are they? The man, Andy, his name tag said, was having a hard time choking the words up. Are they soldiers? They want to take us in, Jude said. Please, can you help us? And then Andy did the absolute last thing I expected him to. He nodded. We rode under the bus in the luggage compartment for the first 20 minutes of the trip, until the train station and the PSFs and Vita were too distant to be caught in his rearview mirror. It was freezing and uncomfortable, but he tossed around under there. We'd slid across the cold metal with every single turn, hunched over on our knees, disoriented. I let Jude loop his arm through mine, adding a little bit of body heat to his. He was muttering something under his breath. I felt him shaking his head, his curls brushed my shoulder. Finally, when the road was quiet, I heard what he was saying. She's never going to forgive us. Who? I asked, my hand squeezing his arm. Kate? No, Vida. Jude, I began. The guilt had clocked in at record time. We did the same thing her sister did to her, Jude explained, cutting me off. We just left her. She's going to hate us forever. What are you talking about? Jude turned back towards me, rubbing his eyes with the back of his hand. Well, you know about Kate, right? How she was our CPS caseworker? Something heavy and slick rose in my stomach. You know, he said quickly, Child Protective Services? Okay, maybe not. You and Vita both? Yeah, he said. You seriously had no idea about that? Kate never told you what she used to do? No, but then again, it wasn't like I had ever asked. So, she what? Pulled you out of foster homes and brought you into the league? Sort of. He leaned back against the door, sliding against me with the next big turn. I had to strain to hear him now. When Ian happened, a lot of kids got turned out of their foster homes. The one who's, didn't die. It was just a bad situation all around because there was no one to even claim them for burial or anything like that. Kate said a lot of caseworkers had a hard time trying to find out what had happened to their kids. She found me before someone turned me in for the reward or I got picked up in the collections. The collections had been a series of mass roundups of the survivors of Ian who hadn't already been sent to camps. Any parents who felt they could no longer care for their freak kids or wanted them to enter the rehabilitation programs of camps just had to send them to school, and the PSFs stopped by to round them up. It was the first big organized intake of kids. The next step was forcing them into camps, whether the parents wanted them gone or not, involuntary collection.
That must have been a really scary time. I felt him shrug, but he struggled to get the next words out. It's, well, it's over. It was better than being at home anyway. Dad was a real winner. I forced my eyes on the road, the way he said, with such forced brightness. And Vida? It was like I had turned a key inside of him, or he was just too exhausted to try to keep it all buried. I don't know what the deal is with her family. She has an older sister, Nadia, who was taking care of her for a while. Kate lost track of her. I guess they were squatting in some building. Vida woke up one morning to find her sister gone and the PSFs there. She thinks that her sister called her in to get the reward money. How did Kate get to her then? I asked. The PSFs had packed about 10 kids into this bus to ship them east to the camp in Wyoming, but the League got there first. You know this story, right? I did, actually. The League had found themselves in possession of 5 kids they had no idea what to do with, so they started the training program. I knew Vida had been with the League for a long time, but I had no idea she was one of the Wyoming 5. Wow, I know. I didn't know what I could say, so I settled on, I'm sorry. Jude made a face. What are you sorry for? You didn't do anything. And besides, we were the lucky ones. Kate's the one who had the hardest time. I don't think she ever got over the kids she lost, especially the ones who died in the fire. What? I breathed out. It was a group home she was in charge of, keeping an eye on. Jude explained. A few of the kids started showing signs of PSI abilities, and the person in charge just freaked out. Kate doesn't know if one of the kids accidentally started the fire or if the woman did it herself. I guess she was really, really, really religious, but like crazy religious. When the police found her, she kept saying how she had done God's work. That's. There was no word for how horrible that was, so I didn't try. Anyway, that's the whole story, Jude shrugged. The beginning, at least. I held my breath as the bus stopped at what I assumed was a checkpoint, and someone, probably a PSF, boarded. We couldn't hear their conversation, only the heavy steps as they walked up and down the length of the bus over our heads. A more thorough soldier would have forced him to open the luggage compartment too, but we were waved on as soon as the only sound was the growl of the road beneath us. Still, he apologized repeatedly when he pulled over to retrieve us. I had every intention of wiping his memory and booking it, but there were no cars, there was nothing on that stretch of highway aside from trees and snow. It was either Andy or another fun day or two wandering around with Jude in Winter Wonderland looking for civilization. Are you sure this is okay? Jude and I had taken one of the front seats to have a better look at the road while he was driving. Can we repay you somehow? Don't get me wrong, Andy said. This is a spectacular waste of gasoline. But I don't mind sticking it to my fine employer every now and then. They cut my benefits the hot second things got bad, so I'm not feeling too generous towards them myself. Besides, the drive down is usually pretty empty, and I have to bring the bus to Richmond whether I have passengers or not. The return trip is usually pretty full. Some folks seem to have the notion that there's more work up north than there is in the south, and hardly anyone can afford those stupid trains. Jude had proven to me about 6 times over in the past day just how naive he was, so it was a wonder he could still surprise me with his carelessness. After a few minutes, he dropped off into an easy, trusting sleep, like there were no dangers on this bus, and no danger with the bus driver using his radio to call us in or driving us to the first functioning police station he happened across. You look like you're about to roll right off that seat and hit the floor, young lady, Andy said, glancing up at me in the large mirror overhead. Maybe you'd consider taking a cue from your friend and getting a little rest? I knew I was being rude and irrational and all sorts of sour, but I kept my eyes fixed on the bus's radio and frowned. Andy glanced down, following my gaze, then started to chuckle. You're smart, he said. I guess you'd have to be in this day and age to be out wandering around. Oh, toll booth coming up. Better get down. I slipped down between the metal guard and seat, adjusting the blanket over Jude's sleeping form. Andy waved back to whomever who had let him through. Finally, I can't stand it anymore. Why are you helping us? I asked. Andy chuckled again. Why do you think? Honestly, I said, leaning forward, because I think you want to turn us in for the reward money. The bus driver let out a low whistle at that. That is a nice chunk of change, I will admit. Funny the government can dig up the cash for that, but can't afford any sort of assistance for food. He shook his head. No, sweetheart, I have a job.
I make do. I don't need the guilty conscience or the blood money. Then why? I demanded. Andy reached over with his left hand, plucking something off his dashboard. The tape around it peeled off without protest, like it was being used to being lifted and then stuck back on. He held it out and waited for me to take it. A little boy smiled back at me from the glossy surface of the photo, dark hair gleaming. He looked 10, maybe 12, if even that. I recognized the muted colors of the backdrop behind him, a school portrait. That's my grandson, Andy explained. His name is Michael. They took him from his school about 4 years ago. When I tried to contact the police about it, the government, the school, they wouldn't tell me anything. Same for everyone. Couldn't post about it online without my access being shut off. Couldn't go on TV or write in the papers because Gray was all over them too. But some parents at his school, they said they overheard some PSFs talking about a place called Black Rock. I wiped the little smudged fingerprints from the photo surface and handed it back to him. You're right, I said. I'm not entirely selfless, I guess. What I'm hoping is that maybe you can give me some information. Maybe you know what or where this Black Rock is, and we can call it even? It was a pleading quality to his voice that did me in. I couldn't detach it from my very own grandmother, left wondering what had happened to me. My skin felt tight around my chest. I do. Black Rock is a camp in South Dakota. South Dakota? Andy sounded astonished. All the way out there? You're sure? I was more than sure. The League had a list of all 15 camps the surviving PSI kids were divided among. Some were itty bitty, a couple dozen kids. Some were converted schools that could hold a few hundred. Then you had camps like Black Rock and Thurmond that, because of their remote location, could hold thousands. The South Dakota camp was a special interest to the League because of the rumors surrounding it. All new births from the time of Ian was officially recognized had to be registered in a special database. Those children were supposed to be brought into local doctors or scientists every month for tests, so they could chart any abnormalities. Any child that developed PSI abilities before the age of 10 was put into a special study program run out of Black Rock. The other kids, if they survived Ian and developed their abilities on a normal schedule, were forcibly picked up and brought to the normal rehab camps. They might have transferred him at some point, I said. Do you know what he is? What do you mean, what he is? Andy said, turning slightly. He's my grandson, that's what he is. I only meant to find out if he was one of the dangerous ones, a red or orange like me, to see if there was a chance he had already been erased, permanently. These camps, Andy began, shielding his eyes from the headlights of a passing truck. You know what they have to do there? Have you seen one yourself? I glanced sideways at Jude. Yeah. And they let you out because they fixed you? He asked, and the hope in his voice broke my heart. You're better now? They can't fix us, I said. All those kids they took aren't doing anything other than working and waiting. I only got out because someone helped me escape. Andy nodded, like he had already expected as much. These are terrible times, he said after a long while, and you're right to not trust any of us. What we've done, what we allowed them to do to you. It's a shameful thing, a shameful, shameful thing, and we'll all go to our graves knowing it. But I want you to know that for every person who would turn in a kid out of fear for funds, there are hundreds and thousands more who fought tooth and nail to keep their families together. I know. It's just, they were such bad times then. And the government kept saying, they kept going on and on about how if parents didn't send the kids to go through the programs, they would die like all of the others. Then it wasn't a choice at all. They knew we couldn't do anything to get them back, and it kills me. It kills me. Did people really think the rehabilitation programs were going to work? I asked. Jude shifted in his seat, trying to get more comfortable. I don't know, sweetheart, Andy said, but I think they hoped like hell they would. You get down to nothing. No money, no work, no house, and hope is all you can tend to have left. And even then, it's a rare commodity. I doubt anyone believes the lies these days, but what can we do about it? We have no information to work with, only rumors. It hit me then how equally important it was for me to find Cole's flash drive, as it was to find Liam. All along, I had been thinking of it as this little plastic device, not sparing much thought to the value of what was locked inside it. Finding Liam mattered to me.
meant everything to me. But finding Cole's data, that would help everyone. That had the potential to reunite families, loved ones. I'm going to get every kid out of every camp, I said. I'm not going to stop until they all get home. Andy nodded, keeping his eyes on the road ahead of him. Then we're more than even. The conversation died out and the radio came on. I watched the sunrise, the colors lighting the horizon of mellow pink, feeling sick to my stomach with exhaustion, but still I couldn't fall asleep. I pulled Liam's jacket up over me like a blanket and felt something slip past my hand, out of one of the pockets. The 2 train tickets the woman had bought floated lazily to the ground, one facing up, the other facing down. Stay. The word had been scribbled several times over by pen on the back of one of the tickets, the letters wild and jagged, and with each stroke, darker and deeper. I picked them up, checking the other ticket. Safe. Stay safe. Apparently, I hadn't had as firm of a grip on that woman as I thought. It was stupid of me to be so frightened and anxious when she was hundreds of miles away, but I couldn't stop myself from picturing the worst. How she could have warned everyone about the terrors in her back seat. She could have gone to the train station and run or called us in to nearby skip tracers. She could have had the reward, the satisfaction of knowing we were off the street and out of her hair. But instead, she had done this. Andy had done this. I ripped up the tickets before Jude could wake up and see them. I didn't want to give him false hope that these people were anything other than lone candle flames in a sea of never-ending black. Jude was still singing, literally singing, the praises of his new hero Andy, when we saw the first signs of Wilmington. Just after he dropped us off near Richmond, he'd give us details and instructions on the right highways to avoid on the way down. I'd been too flustered and annoyed with the delay to thank him at the time. Now every clear road our little stolen car flew down filled me with a sharp pang of regret. Wilmington kissed the Atlantic on one side and a river on the other. It surprised me to see how similar it was to parts of Virginia that I knew. The style of houses, the way the neighborhoods were laid out, even the way the sky grayed out over the roofs, darkening until the clouds finally burst and it began to rain. The address Cole gave me, 1222 West Bucket Road, Wilmington, North Carolina, was a little neighborhood called Dogwood Landing, not too far from what I assumed was a university campus. It was a quiet part of the city, surrounded by frosty woods and filled with a good number of empty lots and crooked, weathered for sale signs. I picked one and parked the green Volkswagen we had stolen after parting ways with Andy in front of it. Is that it? Jude asked, peering closer to the nearest house. No, it's a ways down, I think. I took a deep breath, wondering how it was possible to feel excitement and dread in the same breath. I want to approach from the back in case anyone is watching from the front. That had been the reason why Liam and the others hadn't gone straight home after escaping Caledonia, right? I was torn about it. Albin's advisors were always reminding us how overstretched the PSF forces were, but Liam was a priority catch. What were the chances the government would still have someone posted here, watching Liam's parents a good 9 months later? God, Liam's parents. What the hell was I going to say to them? I signaled for Jude to follow me around the side of one of the houses. Most were on the smaller side, just one story, with gray slanted roofs, brick faces, and white trim. I pulled Jude closer behind me as we made our way through the trees, following a small dirt access road that ran alongside the houses' backyards. Liam's house was nestled deep into the pocket of trees set a ways off from the other houses on the block. It was a similar creature to the other houses around it, with sweet blue shutters and a long driveway leading up to the garage. What I really needed was a view of the front. I held Jude back and forced him to crouch down beside me, and we watched as we looked for surveillance cameras, for footprints and tire tracks, for the undercover PSFs to come strolling around on patrol. It looks, Jude began, hesitating. Empty, my mind finished. It looked like no one was home, and the way the gutters were clogged with fall leaves and grime made me think that they hadn't been back in some time. Maybe they just ran out to go run some errands, he offered. At 4 in the afternoon on a Thursday? Seems sketchy, came a new voice behind us. The girl was a snake. It was only the explanation for how silently she slithered up through the leaves. Leader? Vita said, nodding just as she crouched down behind us. Judith. Jude actually fell over. What are you? I began. How did you? She couldn't have guessed where we'd be. She was good. She wasn't that good. I must have missed a tracker. Something. The collar of the undershirt, Vida said, nodding toward Jude. Next time you decide to cut it and run, make sure you get all the damn trackers. Trackers? Jude repeated, looking between us. Jude fried the car, I said, and everything electric inside it, including, I had assumed, the trackers in his clothes. That would be why they coat all of the Yellow's trackers in rubber, she said, shaking her head. God, you didn't know that? She was clearly proud of herself despite looking like she had just been riddled hard and put away wet. Her hair was twisted in its naturally curly texture. I hauled Jude closer, zipping his coat to feel around for his undershirt stitching. Sure enough, I felt the small bump, no more than the size of a grain, sewn into the collar. I cut it out with my Swiss Army knife and held it for him to see. Before he could grab it, I crushed it with the hilt of my knife. They put trackers in our clothes? Jude looked at us between us in disbelief, though it was clear he was talking to himself. Why would they do that? They can't be. Vida looked like she was about to burst into her particular brand of cruel laughter, but her expression changed, narrowed somehow. Her full focus shifted between us, and she rose back onto her feet, swinging her gun up and out of its holster in one smooth motion. I turned, my hair tumbling down around my face as I scrambled back onto my knees for a better look. The world dropped. I actually felt it cave under me, felt every bone and muscle in my chest fall with it. I don't know how I managed to pull myself back up or how I came to be standing, but I was too numbed with shock to care that I was in full sight of whoever might have been watching. Then I was running. I heard Vida and Jude call after me, but the wind and rain carried their voices up and away. I wasn't hearing anything over the thrum of blood in my ears. I shoved my way down the slight roll of the hill, through the tangle of tree branches, through the collapsing fence, through to him. He slipped out of the window, climbing through the torn dark screen one leg at a time, until finally his shoes sank into the mud below. His hair was longer than I remembered, the bones in his profile of his face sharper. He'd gotten larger, or I had become smaller, or memory was really a lie. It didn't matter. He heard me coming and spun around, one hand going for something inside of his heavy camo jacket, the other for something in the waistband of his jeans, and I knew when he spotted me, every part of him froze. And then his full lips began to work, silently, until they finally settled on the tiniest of smiles. My feet slowed but didn't stop. I was breathing hard, my whole chest heaved with effort to keep the air moving. I pressed a hand hard against my heart, exhaustion and relief at the same time. Bitter terror I had felt the afternoon I'd lost him came flooding in. I just didn't have the strength to fight them back anymore. I burst into tears. Oh, for the love of... Chubbs shook his head and sighed, but I heard the affection in his voice all the same. It's just me, you dumbass. Without another word, he crossed those last 2 steps between us and wrapped me tight in his arms. Chapter 9. The problem was, once I started, I couldn't stop. I felt every bit of me sag against him, needing the reassurance that he was solid and that the heart beating next to my ear was his. Chubbs patted my back awkwardly as I buried my face in his jacket and went to pieces. How, I choked out, why are you here? The rustling in the trees behind us barely registered in my mind, but Chubbs looked up, calling, Oh, come on, Lee. I know you want a hug too. And it happened too fast to warn him to stop any of it. Chubbs released me only to spin me behind him, throwing me more off kilter than I had been before. I thought for sure that my mind was playing tricks on me because it looked like he had pulled a long hunting knife up out of his waistband of his pants. It looked like Vida was pointing her gun straight at him, switching off the safety. It's... I began, feeling my arms strain under my grip. Chubbs. Who the hell are you? He demanded. Not the person who brought a knife to a gunfight, Vida said, waving her weapon with emphasis. Wait, 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 Jude said, popping out from behind the tree to her right. He slid partway down the muddy hill, throwing himself between them. Not Liam, he said, pointing at himself, then at Vida. Not Liam either. Jude turned back toward Chubbs, his thick eyebrows drawing together as he moved his finger our way. Also not Liam. At that, Vida turned to stare at him. In what universe does this tool look anything like Cole Stewart? Jude's voice went high as he got defensive. I don't know. Brother from a different mother? There is such a thing as adoption. Chubbs lowered his knife. I could see his mind working behind his eyes, jumping from one horrible possibility to another as he took account of the strangers, my tears, and the absence of Liam. Oh my God, he said, going gray in the face. He pressed a fist against his stomach like he was about to be sick. Oh my God. No, no, I said quickly. He's not dead. That you know of, my mind whispered. Why aren't you together? Now he looked close to tears himself. Chubbs's hair had grown out past its usual neat crop, and the silver-rimmed glasses that actually fit his face made him look so much more mature than I remembered. He didn't really look like himself, not until I saw the fear come crashing over him. This was the Chubbs I remembered, always between one panic and the next. He never would have left you. Never. I looked away, not toward Vida and Jude, who had gone silent watching this, but to soft mud cupping rain puddles at our feet. Ruby, Chubbs began, his voice strained. What happened? I shook my head, pressing my freezing hand to my face. You left him? He guessed. You had a fight? You split up for a few days? By whispering it, I was hoping I could take some of the sting out of the truth. But that wasn't the case at all. Chubbs took a stunned step back, his eyes flashing with horror. No, you didn't, he said, gripping my shoulders. That was the only reason I thought it would be okay. I thought you two would stay together. What was I supposed to do? I demanded, not caring that my voice was rising. You were dead, and they had taken us in, and I made a deal, and I knew he wouldn't go otherwise. What the hell was I supposed to do? Chubb shook his head. And these kids, their league? You're with them? There, I started to say, still standing here and waiting for an exclamation as to who the hell this is. Vida cut in, every trace of amusement gone from her face. My brain was finally starting to reassemble itself into working order, and with it came fresh, sharp fear. Vida was here. Vida, who had been chasing us down to bring us back into the league. Vida, who had now seen Chubbs and could identify him to the league if it came to that, who might even try to bring him in. I pushed him back, trying to keep him behind me. He's no one, I said. He's not any concern of yours. Yeah, he freaking is if he's coming with us to find Stuart, Vida said. What did you say? Plug your empty ass brain in, she said. I'm not here to take you back. I'm here to help you, she turned on Jude. Nice of you to repay me by electrocuting me, you little shit. If you weren't there with Beta Team and Barton to take us into HQ, then why? Vida rolled her eyes, but did not answer, eventually with the smuggest look possible. I was looped in on your little romantic quest. The only way to get me out without looking suspicious was to suggest that I come after you dumbasses, since I supposedly know your crappy personalities so well. What about Beta Team? Jude asked. Recalled to HQ. Orders to bring Rob back in or something. You two lace panties are about caused a fucking riot back home with your little stunt. She tossed her hair back. Albin gave me 2 weeks to find you, so let's get this horror show on the road. I stared at her, shaking my head. You are so full of it. You think we're just gonna skip away with you into the sunset? No, Vida said. I expect you to fucking prance. And you're gonna do it with a smile and the least amount of bitching possible, or Cole isn't gonna honor your stupid deal to have the League free the camps. It was true then. She was telling the truth about being here to help us. Cole wouldn't have looped her in otherwise. The objective was too valuable. It surprised me how much it stung my pride to know he didn't think I could handle this op on my own, that I needed backup. Jude turned to look at me, totally lost. Okay, vamonos, Vida said, clapping her hands. If you're going to check out the house, then do it fast. I'm not going anywhere with you, Chubbs cut in. I recognized the expression on his face. How many times I had seen it after the others took me in, before he came to actually accept the fact that I was staying with them. Chubbs had never been one to hide his feelings. Whether it was anger or fear or suspicion, he and Liam were alike in that way, only it came to Liam by nature and Chubbs by force. I'm not sure he saw a point in pretending to be anything he wasn't. Yes, I said, taking Chubbs's arm again. I felt the muscles there strain under my fingers. Come on, we need to talk. I'll explain everything. Chubbs cast his unhappy expression down at me. Just us, then. I don't. All four of us heard it at once. Car doors slamming. 1, 2, 3. I pulled Chubbs back so we were flush against the house, motioning for Jude to come toward us quickly. Vida circled around the nearby trees, her boots silent in the soft mulch. Her head of bright hair was the last trace of her to vanish into the rain. I glanced up at the window Chubbs had wiggled out of, my hand stretching up to touch the loose screen. Then back toward the woods. Maybe we could make a run for it. Maybe. Try to disappear into the wildlife and lose them that way. Is it Barton? Jude was whispering. Chubbs and I both shushed him. The back of Liam's house was lined with 5 white trimmed windows and one perfectly sweet little screen door, which had been nailed into place with sturdy plywood boards. A square of brick had been lovingly placed to serve as the patio at the back entrance of the home. Now green grass, growing in the misty rain, had crawled up through the cracks. I dropped to the damp bricks on my hands and knees, slowly working my way along the length of the house until the voices became louder. My nails dug into the fabric of my pants, ears straining. 2 men, 1 woman. When I finally turned back around to tell the boys this, Vida was already there, crouching between Chubbs and Jude. When she felt my eyes on her, she glanced up and gave an impatient jerk of her chin. There are 4 altogether, she whispered. 1 woman, 3 men. They look like they're PSFs. I covered Jude's mouth with my hand. Are they armed? She nodded. The usual. What's with this house? Why is it important enough that they installed motion sensors? Sensors? Chubb said. They stuck them under the roof, over the hanging at all 4 corners of the house, she said, clearly annoyed he didn't immediately take her word for the gospel truth. I shared a glance with Chubbs, letting Jude pry his hands away from his face. Of course they wouldn't have installed something to monitor the house, if not for Liam. Then for Cole. Interesting that Cole hadn't bothered to feed her any of this brother's backstory. Maybe there just hadn't been time. The voices had quieted down, but I heard their heavy tread through the overgrown garden at the right end of the house. They'd be too close now for us to try to outrun them in the trees. There was no way they wouldn't spot us. With a sigh that shook his entire tall frame, Chubb stood and pushed the dangerous flaps of the window screen aside. Resignation made his shoulders slump. Do you trust me? He asked, seeing my expression. Of course. Jude made a small noise behind me, but I ignored him. Then tell your friends to get inside. He nodded to the now open window, and stand up, I'm going to have to handcuff you. Here was the nice thing about being shocked, senseless. I didn't have to pretend to be terrified. I stood there, feeling the sharp edges of the clear plastic ties cutting off my blood supply at my wrist. I let them disconnect every single thought in my head. Who is this person? I thought, studying him closer now. He was wearing the hooded camo hunting jacket I had vaguely noticed before, a gray wool turtleneck, and a pair of faded jeans, battered by dust and long wear. Strapped to his hip was what looked like a small cell phone in a leather pouch. When we had traveled together before, he had kept all of his possessions in a battered leather briefcase he had found. That had suited him so much better than this weird imitation of what he thought a hunter should look like. It should have been reassuring to see him so prepared and well supplied, but somehow it only frightened me more. Chubbs's hand was steady as he took my chin in his hands, turning it to and fro, inspecting the cuts and bruises from the night before with disapproving look. The others watched from behind the closed window, Jude's face so close it was almost pressed up against the glass. It might be better if you pretend to pass out, he said. The suggestion came just in time as I hit the ground. I saw the flash of black as the PSFs rounded the corner. 4. Vida had been right. The brown-haired woman was the tallest of the group. One was an older guy, his hair puffing out in an ashy blonde ring around his head. The other 2 were younger, looked enough like to be brothers, all armed with standard-issue rifles, handcuffs, the works. Can I help you? Chubbs's face was set in stone. The soldiers didn't know what to make of us, but they also didn't lower their weapons. I was starting to put it together, though, long before Chubbs began to speak again. What? So you're here to swipe my score out from under my nose? Trying to weasel out having to pay me? The older soldier cocked his beetled brow. You're a skip tracer? My thoughts exactly. If that was the ruse we were running with, we were in more trouble than I thought. On a good day, Chubbs was about as threatening as a potted cactus. Here, he said, reaching into the leather pouch on his belt and thrusting something at the PSF.
It looked like a small booklet about the size of a passport. The old man stepped forward but turned to look at the woman. Take a walk around the perimeter, make sure she was traveling alone. Chubbs waved the booklet again as the other three took their wallet. The old man sighed, glancing back and forth between Chubbs's face and whatever was written there. All right, Mr. Lister, he said, passing it back to him. Have you run this one through the database? She's not in it, Chubb said. She probably's been coasting for quite some time. There aren't any records of her. Did you test her? He asked. If she's a blue or yellow, you'll need. She's a green, Chubbs interrupted. Why? Want a demonstration? We can take her, the man offered. Save you the trouble of transporting. I told you, she's not in the system, Chubb said, the nasty edge to his voice more pronounced. I know how this works. You can't line up my payment if she isn't registered. I have to go into the nearest station and do the paperwork if I want the bounty. The man snorted but didn't try to deny it. Was the car on the road yours? No, Chubb said, rolling his eyes. I flew in on a cloud and came blitzing down from high heavens like a bolt of lightning on this kid. Hey now, the PSF's gruff reply came. I can take her, and there's not a damn thing you'd be able to do about it, so watch your attitude, boy. The attitude was what was throwing me off, too. Chubbs wasn't brave by nature. Courage tended to rear up when he felt that his friends were threatened. True. But this wasn't so much bravery as it was recklessness. And that was the very last thing I associated with him. I don't know how much time passed between them in the moment the PSF's radio buzzed. A minute, 10 years, forever. This Jacobson, do you read? The man unclipped his black walkie from his belt. I read. Did you find anything? No, nothing out of the ordinary. It's hard to tell much with the rain coming down. Any footprints would be washed out. Over. She's alone. I'm sure of it, Chubbs was saying. I followed her. All right, the man said. I saw his boots sink that much deeper into the dead, muddy grass as he took 2 steps toward me. My eyes squeezed shut again, and it was near impossible to force my body to go limp with him so close. I didn't want him touching me. Panic flared up bright as the morning light as his boots nudged my ribs. The cold, wet leather of his glove closed around my upper arm, and he yanked me off the ground. My arm twisted, sending a sharp shooting pain into my shoulder. Don't! Chubb snarled. Don't touch! The PSF's grip didn't ease. I mean, Chubbs began again, this time his voice neutral. They take out the cost of medical care from the reward money if the kids are injured. I can't I can handle it from here, sir. That's better, the man said, dropping me face down into the dirt. Get her and clear the hell out of here. You're trespassing, and if I find you back here, I'll arrest you myself. The rainwater was collecting in my ear, running free down the curve of my cheek, and soaking Liam's old jacket. I waited for it to carry my fear away too, down into the earth where it couldn't touch me again. I took one deep, wet gulp of air and held it. The car engine started in the distance. I opened my eyes again, watching Chubbs come toward me. He knelt, one hand smoothing the tangled cloud of hair off my face. We listened to the wheels churn up the loose gravel of the driveway, both of us still and silent. I'm sorry, Chubb said finally. Are you okay? Did he dislocate your shoulder? Because if he did, I'm all right, I said. But could you please cut the zip ties off now? I was horrified by the way my voice shook. But in addition to the discomfort, my brain was starting to spark up old memories that were better left buried deep. The bus ride into Thurmond, the sorting, Sam. The minute I heard the plastic snap under his knife, I was pushing myself up onto my knees, ignoring the ache in my right shoulder. Chubbs began to reach over to check on it, but I leaned back, just out of his reach. We sat there staring at each other, letting the space between us fill with rain and silence. Finally, I held out my hand, and without a word, he pressed the black booklet into it. The cover was a tough faux leather, and I hadn't necessarily been wrong into thinking it was a passport. At first glance, it looked exactly the same, from the faint blue paper and the iridescent United States of America seal overlaying it. Fugitive PSI Recovery Agent. God, there was an official title for it? Joseph Lister, I read, age 24, 6 feet, 170 pounds, from Penn Hills, Pennsylvania. I glanced over him. He was wearing an identical scowl to the one in his official photograph. You know, it's funny. The least believable thing about all of that is your weight. Oh, hilarious, he groused, snatching it back from me before I could skim through the other pages. It was so Chubbs I knew, that I smiled. He struggled to keep his lips pressed in a stern line, but I saw the beginnings of a curve. I really thought you were dead, I said quietly. I shouldn't have let them take you. He brought a hand up to his shoulder, pressing it there, as if his mind was cycling back to that moment. You pushed the panic button, right? I nodded. I would have done the same thing, he said. The exact same thing. Well, he stopped, actually considering this. I probably would have been a little steadier on applying pressure to the wound, but other than that, yes. Well, you'll want to stop now, I told him dryly, before you ruin our touching moment. The window above us suddenly opened, and Jude's curling mass of hair appeared there. Rue, are you okay? Oh my God, Vita wouldn't let me watch. But I tried to go around front, but the doors are all boarded up, and there's nothing in here, so I just. Chubbs helped me up, giving me a look that clearly asked, what fresh hell is this? I'll tell you everything later, and you're going to do the exact same. But for now, we have to see what we can find some kind of clue of what direction Lee might have headed. Chubb's brow drew together as he lowered his voice. Didn't Lee tell you the procedure he and Harry set up to make contact? I knew he had one, just not what it was. I said, but he told you? He nodded, shifting so his back was facing the window, and I realized the people inside. We need to go. Now. Wait, I began, but he had already had his arm half looped through mine. They're watching the house. We have to go, he said. And I'm sorry, I'd much rather not have the League riding with us. I detangled my arm from his, taking a step back. I can't leave them. You are not League, he insisted. You are not one of them. You're one of us. Don't think about it as an us and them, I pleaded. We can all work together on this for now. You don't have to come back with us to California after we find Liam. You just have to stay with us now. Out of the corner of his eye, I caught Vita's electric blue hair through the window screen. Back then, you didn't want me to stay either, remember? Yeah, but that was different, he said, his voice low. And you know it. But at the time, you didn't know that. I had read him right. I saw it in his face, in the rigid lines of his tight shoulders. You asked me if I trusted you, I whispered. Do you trust me? He blew out a long breath, his hands resting on his hips. God help me, he said finally. I do, but I trust you, not them. I don't even know who they are. I only held out my hand and waited for him to take it. I needed his long fingers to close around mine, wanted that final proof that this better sense and reasoning had given way to a belief he used to have in me. I waited for him to come to me, to accept that we were now in this together again. That time, in the distance, and the uncertainty hadn't been enough to shake us. And he did. Chapter 10. The tan SUV reeked of fake evergreens. The smell of the air freshener was so overpowering I had to roll down my windows to get the fresh air circulating. You wouldn't be complaining if you were there to smell the guy I bought it off of, Chubb said, handing me a pair of sunglasses to wear. Now put your seatbelt on, please. Vida and Jude were already buckled into the back seat, though they hadn't gone quietly. My favorite team member got one look at the metal grating that separated the front seats from the back and just about ripped my hair out of the roots, trying to yank me out from the front seat. Are we trying to drive slowly because you have no idea where you're going? Vida asked, or because you're hoping we jump out of the car and put ourselves out of our misery? Jude sat straight up, alarmed. We both recognized that tone. Vida picks fights when she's bored and battles when she's stressed. If it were the latter, the only one of them that would make it out of this car ride alive, we'd be washing the blood off the windows for weeks. That'd be doing the psychos holding your leashes a favor. For the first time, I was grateful for the metal grating between us. They are not psychos, you condescending dick, she snarled. I'm condescending? Do you even know what that word means? You piece of flaming. So, Jude said, his voice high. Rue, how do you and Chubbs know each other? Charles, he gritted out. My name is Charles. That's supposed to be better? Vida scoffed. Chubbs let the car roll to a stop at a red light and turned to look at me, fire burning behind the lenses of his glasses. Yep, I said. She's always like this. The tension that welled up in the car hovered amongst us, strung tight. One word or one wrong move would snap it. Jude drummed his fingers against the armrest. Cut that shit out, Nimrod, before I cut them off, Vida said. Nimrod? He shot back, his voice jumping an octave with outrage. You don't have to be so mean, you know? I pressed a hand to my forehead. That gets you upset? That dumb name? She's been calling you Judith for months. Chubbs laughed, but turned it into a cough when he saw my look. Yeah, well, Jude huffed, drawing his bony knees up to his chest. I guess I just don't see what's so insulting about being called a girl. The two of you seem to do okay when you're not biting my head off for acting like I'm 5 years old. As opposed to what? Chubb said, flickering on the turn signal to merge onto the highway. The 10-year-old you actually are? Hey, I warned, none of that. He's almost 15. Rue, Jude began, his eyes shining. Thank you. You were that gawky when I first met you, I continued, poking Chubbs in the shoulder. And you were 18. Never mind, Jude grumbled. You were the gawky one, he corrected. Lee was the reckless one, Zoo was the cute one, and I was the wise one. There was a knock on the grate behind us. Jude's face floated up there, his dark brown eyes peering between the two of us from behind the metal screen. It would be nice, he said, if we had any idea what you guys are talking about. Like, who is this Zoo person? Chubb's eyes slid over to meet mine. Exactly how much did you tell them? Exactly nothing, Vita said. And if it stays that way, I will make you regret it. This time I rolled my eyes. Sure, whatever you say. I felt the familiar warm tingling at the center of my chest and had just enough time to gasp as some invisible hand yanked me forward, smacking my forehead against the dashboard with enough force to stun me down. Chubb slammed on the brakes, forcing my seatbelt to do its job and lock against my chest. I was thrown back into my seat, an explosion of colors bursting in my vision. Oh, hell no, Chubbs roared, slamming a hand against the steering wheel. That's it. We do not use our abilities on one another. God damn it. Behave yourself. Chill the fuck out, Granny, Vita said. You're going to give yourself a stroke. You cannot give yourself. Chubbs began to growl but caught himself. Jude let out a nervous laugh behind us, but I only pressed a hand to my stinging forehead. She had made her point. Zoo was a friend of ours, I said. We traveled together for a while. I thought Kate got you out, though, Jude said. Did you guys get separated or something? It seems like it would be dangerous just to be wandering around. It wasn't like that, Chubb said. After the three of us broke out of camp, he might as well have told the others that he was a wizard. Even Vita leaned forward, suddenly so much more interested. You? She began. You broke out of camp? Liam planned it, Chubbs gritted out. But yes, I did. Does that kid think he's some kind of expert in getaways? Vita muttered. God damn. Jude's eyes were bright with interest. What was that like? Did you have your own room? Like a little prison cell? Did they make you do hard labor? I heard that the kids in the league knew about the camps vaguely. There were only a few of us who'd actually lived in one, experienced the life firsthand, but there was an unspoken rule we didn't talk about it. Everyone knew the truth, but the truth didn't live inside them the same way it did for us. They'd heard about the sorting machines, the cabins, the testing, but most of their stories were gossip, completely wrong. These kids had never stood for hours on end in an assembly line. They didn't know the fear came from the shape of a small black camera lens, an eye that followed you everywhere, at all times. My chest tightened with effort of keeping silent. One by one, my fingers closed around the seatbelt's silver fabric until I was all but choking it. Do you not remember it or something? Jude asked. Were you only there for a little while? Is that why you can't talk about it? Because there's nothing to say? I would shut your mouth, Chubbs advised. Come on, Jude whined. If she'd just talk to us. What? The words exploded out of me. What do you want me to tell you? You want to hear about how they tied us up like animals to bring us into camp? Or, hey, how about the time a PSF once beat in a girl's skull so badly she actually lost an eye? You want to know what that was like to drink rotten water for an entire summer until new pipes finally came? How I woke up afraid and went to bed in terror every single day for 6 years? For God's sake, leave me alone. Why do you always have to dig and dig when you know I don't want to talk about it? I regretted the outburst halfway through, but the speech tumbled out, one vile, traitorous word after another. Chubbs only glanced at the glowing blue clock, then back up at the soggy road. In the back seat, Jude was as silent as snow falling on asphalt, his mouth opening and closing, like he was trying to taste the burn of his words after they left his lips. I don't know about the rest of you, but I'd be up for hearing about the one-eyed chick, Vita said with a shrug. You are actually the worst person I have ever met, Chubb said.
And people like you are the reason we have middle fingers. Guys, I started. Kate had once told me a long time ago that the only way to survive your past was to find a way to close it off behind you, to shut one door before passing into another, brighter room. I was afraid. That was the truth. I was afraid of the guilt and shame that would come flooding in when I retraced my steps, turned the lock, and found the girl I had abandoned. I didn't want to know what the darkness there had done to her, if she wouldn't even recognize herself in my face. I didn't want to know what Chubbs would think of me after he found out what I'd done for the League. I didn't want to know what Liam would think of me or the smell of the smoke in my hair that never went away, no matter how many times I washed it. At least tell us about how you ended up splitting up with Liam, Jude said. If you guys were traveling together, why did you, stop? Kate came to get you when you pushed the panic button, I know. But Liam was gone by then? What about him? He pointed at Chubbs. Those memories weren't any less painful, but they were important. All right, I said. You know that we traveled together, Liam, Chubbs, Zoo, and me. But what you didn't know is that we were looking for a place, a safe haven called the East River. To understand why I did it and how we ended up on his own, I have to start there. Fine, Vida answered, leaning back away from the grating, her eyes drifting over to the window to her right. The first traces of snow drifted into our roaring path. I told him about the East River, how it had felt like a dream until we woke up and realized we were trapped in a nightmare. About Clancy, which was so much harder than I ever expected, how we escaped, how Chubbs was shot, and how it was just the two of us in the safe house. Jude started to interrupt, his eyes wide with either anxiety or confusion, I couldn't tell. I felt my own heart drift up and up and up until I had to swallow it down to get through what came next. My decision and Kate's deal, what I had seen in Cole's memory, and how his own explanation of it. In the strangest way, it made me feel closer to Liam. He was alive and vivid in my thoughts. Solid, warm Liam, with his sunglasses on, the sunlight in his hair, and the words of a favorite song on his lips. I half expected to look up and see him in the driver's seat. No one spoke. I couldn't bring myself to look behind me. I felt both Jude's and Vita's conflicted feelings cling to my skin the way condensation was gathering on the windows. I felt a light touch on my shoulder. I turned slowly to see that Jude retracted his finger back through the metal grate. His bottom lip was white where it was caught between his teeth. But he was looking at me, not with fear or any of its ugly cousins, just deep, sincere sadness. He could still stand to look at me. Rue, Jude whispered. I'm so sorry. Can I just ask one thing? Chubb said. His voice sounded tight in his throat after I finished. What are you doing with the flash drive? I was going to bring it back to Cole, I said. He and I have a deal. If I get the intel back to him, it'll be enough to shift the priorities of the League back to freeing the kids from camps and exposing the government's lies. Chubbs rubbed his forehead. And you believe him? The only thing Liam ever said about him was that he used to set his toys on fire when he didn't get his way. I believe him, I said. He won't hurt us. He's one of the few who didn't want us gone, apparently. Gone? Chubbs asked, alarmed. I let Jude explain. His stumbling, rambling explanation was coated by rough grief, and it made the story that much more horrible to hear. No, 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 Chubbs said. You're just going back, hoping they manage to pick out all the bad seeds? Don't say it like that, Jude cried. It'll get better. Rob's gone, right? Kate will let us know when we can come back. You and Liam will be safe, at least from the League, I told Chubbs. They won't come after you. You get it, right? You understand why I told Cole I had to do this? Sure, I get it, he said, his voice cold enough to drive a chill through even my own veins again. I read the question he was asking in silence. He left a fill in the space between us. I knew what he wanted to ask because it was the same thought that had been circling my head for days. If the intel was that important, why would you ever give it to the League? Of all the training and ops and the League-sponsored explosions I'd been unfortunate enough to witness, none seemed half as dramatic as Chubbs' thrilling tale of escape. We pulled into an old camping ground for the night, just outside of a city called Asheville in western North Carolina. I'd managed to fill most of the 5-hour drive with explanations, and the whole thing had kind of left me drained. I didn't put up any kind of struggle when Chubbs and Jude argued for stopping. We did a quick walkthrough of the area to make sure it was clear of visitors before returning to pull supplies from the SUV. I popped the latch, stepping back from the door as it opened. Oh my God, I managed. The whole thing was just so impressive. A wall of small, stacked plastic tubs and drawers, all labeled with handy reminders like first aid and rope and vitamins and fishing hooks. The care and forethought it had taken to put all this together was impressive, if not completely terrifying, in how ruthlessly thoughtful he was. Jude gave Chubbs a long look of appraisal. You had day of the week underwear growing up, didn't you? Chubbs merely pushed the glasses up the bridge of his nose. I don't see how that's any of your business. He laid out the entirety of the story for me as we set up the tent and had folded neatly under the back seat. Vida, at least, was able to get a small fire going with a lighter. I don't actually remember most of this stuff happening, Chubbs said, struggling with a tense frame. The League brought me to the nearest hospital, which happened to be the one in Alexandria. Not Fairfax? I asked, smoothing the damp hair away from my face. Jude and Vida were doing their best to listen, all while pretending they weren't. Chubb shrugged. I have a vague memory of seeing some faces, but I told you that I look like my dad, right? I nodded. Well, one of the doctors recognized me. She used to work with Dad, but transferred anyway, it's not important. They managed to stabilize me, but this doctor and her staff knew I needed to be in better equipped hospital. So she got on the phone and tracked Dad down. He was going to meet us at my aunt's restaurant, remember? I remember. He was able to meet the ambulance when it arrived in Fairfax Hospital. They already had a fake ID prepared for me, so that's what they registered me under. They kept an oxygen mask on my face the entire time. I got walked through two sets of security guards, and no one looked twice. And they didn't tell the agents who brought you in? I finished. The League has no idea what happened to you. You're still listed as MIA in all the op-related files. They tried telling the agents I coded out and died, but they didn't bite. One day, my dad had 6 different people come to him fishing for information, but they didn't get a word out of him. The real trick hadn't been admitting him at the new hospital under a false name. The hospital had become well versed in a don't ask, we won't tell policy when it came to dealing with the government and the requests for information. So much so that they were nearly shut down for a good half dozen times. Dr. Meriwether's stroke of genius was to hide his son, Marcus Bell, in an isolated room in the maternity ward for treatment. When he was strong enough, he was zipped up in a body bag and taken out of the hospital in a rented hearse. The League agents found the transfer paperwork and tried to connect the dots, but Chubbs became a ghost the moment he had been wheeled into Fairfax Hospital. From there, it had been a matter of finding a place for Chubbs to recuperate and build his strength back up again. I will leave it to you to imagine what it was like to live in a ramshackle barn in upstate New York for 4 months, he said, grimacing as he rolled his shoulder back. I will go to my grave smelling hay and manure every time I close my eyes. The old barn belonged to a close family friend in the Adirondacks, and it had been isolated, cold, and lonely. By the sound of it, his parents could only come up twice to see him without sparking suspicion, but the elderly woman who owned the farm was there twice a day to help with his physical therapy and provide food. Mostly, though, he was bored to tears. I like to think I get along pretty well with the elderly, but this woman looked like she dragged herself up from the crypt every morning. Yeah, to feed and nurse you, I reminded him. The only books she had were about a crime solving spinster bothering people in her small village. He said, I'm allowed to be a little bitter about the experience. No, I said. Actually, I'm pretty sure you're not. How did you end up doing all of this, though? Jude asked. Chubb sighed. I actually had to give Mrs. Berkshire her credit. It was something she said after I told her how I got out of Virginia, that the last place people tend to look for the hunted is among the hunters. She fell asleep mid-sentence, of course. I had to wait 4 hours to be blessed with the second half of her old lady mission. I pressed a hand over my eyes. I'll have you know, I haven't been suspected once, he said, a bit too pleased with himself. My parents got the doctored birth papers, which was the hardest part. It's actually not that difficult to be registered as an official skip tracer. You just have to provide the right paperwork and establish yourself. A fire popped loudly, collapsing the small pile of wood we'd gathered. It seemed to be the right place to take a break in the story. I stood and pulled Chubbs up off the ground to come with me. Jude started to rise, but I waved him back. We're just going to get some firewood, I said. We'll be right back. Don't worry, Vita said, in her sugary sweet voice. She wrapped an arm around Jude's shoulder. We have been known to survive 2 whole minutes without you. I tried very hard not to stomp over to the car. I really do not trust that girl, Chubb said, glancing back over his shoulder to where Vita was sitting, her legs stretched out in front of her. Youths who dye their hair are always battling inferiority complexes or hiding secrets. I raised an eyebrow. Youths? He was so focused on her that he almost whacked himself in the face with the rear door of the SUV. Chubbs's hand flew to his left shoulder as if to protect itself. Let me see it, I said, stopping him before he could reach for the tub labeled protein bars. He sighed and slipped that arm from his jacket sleeve. There was enough stretch in his shirt's fabric for him to pull the collar down across his left shoulder, where a quarter-sized patch of pink puckered skin stood out stark against the otherwise dark skin. Did they? My throat suddenly felt dry. Did they get it out? The bullet? He adjusted his shirt, smoothing it back down again. It was a clean shot. It went straight through. As far as bullet wounds go, it wasn't anything awful. It wasn't anything awful. I swallowed, a weak attempt to keep from crying. Oh, geez, not again, he said. I'm fine. I'm alive, right? Why did you come back? I whispered, hearing my own voice break. Why didn't you stay up there, where it was safe? Chubbs, food cradled against his chest, reached one long arm to close the door. And leave you two idiots out on the run? I watched him heave in 2 deep breaths, then send them sailing out in a long white cloud. I'm so angry with you, he finally said in a low voice. I'm furious. I know why you erased yourself. I understand. But all I want to do is shake some sense back into you. I know, I said. I know, okay? Do you, though? He asked. You won't leave these two, even though they could report me and Lee back to the League. You put yourself in the line of fire, and the worst people, and you did it without someone there to watch your back. How do you think Lee's going to react when he finds out what you did? The knot in my stomach tightened to the point of pain. He was furious, the strength of anger powering him like a beacon to my mind. It made him vulnerable, exposed. He won't find out, I said. I told you, all I was going to do was get the flash drive and make sure he was all right. I wasn't going to. I'm not going to interfere. That is the most bullshit, cowardly thing I have ever heard come out of your mouth, he shot back. You lied to us before about what you are, and I got it. I understand why you did it, but now you're out, and we can all be together again, and you're choosing the only option that ends with us apart? Maybe Liam could forgive you for what you did, but if you go back to them, to California, I will never forgive you. He started to turn back to the fire and dark green tent, only to pivot back to me. Do you remember what it felt like when we were at East River, when the East River was attacked and we hid in the lake? All that night I kept thinking, well, this is the worst thing that will ever happen to me. I thought the same thing when we escaped Caledonia, and when we had to leave the other guys in our cabin behind, bleeding to death in the snow. And again, when I was shot. But the thing is, I was wrong. Ruby, the worst thing, the worst feeling, was being safe up in that barn and not knowing, for 6 months, what happened to you and Liam and Suzume. It was seeing your names pop up on the skip tracer networks with upped rewards and potential sightings, and not being able to find any of you for months. Sometimes, most of the times with Chubbs, really it was impossible to tell his anger from his fear. They fed into each other. Then all of a sudden you were showing up everywhere, in Boston, in a train station in Rhode Island. You were being really careless there, you know? He shot me a disapproving look. Liam's even worse. For months, nothing. Then a tip about him being sighted in Philadelphia. I had to doctor evidence that the tip was bad to get it deleted off the network. The League had backdoor access to both the PSF and Skip Tracer databases of kids, but neither of Liam's profiles looked like they had been updated in ages. I knew. I checked twice a week. No wonder it looked like it hadn't been updated since the last time I looked. How did you know to go to his house? I asked. The timing couldn't have been a coincidence. I figured it had to be something to do with protocol Harry set up. to help them find each other. Based on the sightings, I thought maybe the two of you were coming down to his old house to check to see if his stepdad got set up with the procedure. Which was that. When Cole and Liam left to join the league, Harry told them that if he and their mom felt like they needed to get out, he'd leave coordinates under the windowsill of Liam's old bedroom. And you have the coordinates? No, he said. There was nothing there. That must be why went to find Cole in Philadelphia, to see if he knew anything. Chubbs rubbed a knuckle over his lips, nodding. That's what I was thinking too. It doesn't help us, though, if Cole had no idea either. I know, running blind, just like old times. Chubb sighed, and I swayed toward him, resting my forehead against his upper arm. We'll watch the Skip Tracer network, see if there's any other sightings, Chubb shifted, hiking the cans up against his chest. He's screwed up a few times in the past. Chances are he'll do it again. It was a terrifying thought. We might pick up hints of him here and there, but chances were we'd be too far away to swoop in and help if he were captured. He had a big enough head start on us that he could put some real distance behind him, and it was overwhelming to know that suddenly everything seemed so much harder and more impossible than only a few minutes before. It all felt so pointless. I'm so tired of this, I told him. I know I don't have any right to be, and I know I did this to myself, but I don't want to fight anymore. I'm so tired of everything, of all of this, and knowing it's never going to get any better, that nothing I do will ever make anything better. I'm so sick of it all. Chubb shifted the cans in his arms, ducking down to get a closer look at my face. I wasn't crying, but my throat ached and my head was pounding. No, what you are is exhausted, he said. Depression, anxiety, difficulty focusing. You're a classic case. Come on, you'll feel better after you get food and some sleep. That won't solve anything either. I know, he said, but it's a start. I learned a long time ago that it was possible to be so far past the point of exhaustion that sleep no longer felt like an option. My stomach ached with the need for it, and my head felt heavy, but I could feel myself waiting for something. Muscles tense and brain unable to settle. It was like no matter how hard I fought to focus on the point of the tent's roof, to count sheep, my mind kept drifting back to the night we had spent in the abandoned Walmart. The kids we had been so convinced were going to screw us over in the worst way. I must have nodded off at some point, because the next thing I knew, I was startled awake by a cold blast of air. Vida was starting to open the tent, unzipping it slowly and quietly as she could, stepping through. My head was slow to come up out of the fog of sleep, but I was alert enough to be suspicious, no matter how much I wanted to drift back into dreamland. I counted to 30, to 60. I listened as her footsteps grew softer, watched, waiting for her to come back. She didn't. What are you up to? I thought, crawling over Chubbs's long legs to the tent's opening. If she had needed to get a breath of fresh air or relieve herself, she would have been back by now. Despite the crippling dark, I spotted her right away. She was shivering.